Greetings and welcome to Fanfiction Reader. I'm thrilled to bring fanfiction to life through audio. I put a lot of effort into these readings, so if you're enjoying the journey, please consider giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Your support means a lot. Now, let's dive into the story.
Chapter 141 Where to Go Next? Eddard Stark did not stay in the Twins for too long. After repeatedly giving orders to Lord Wyman, asking him to find Arya Stark as soon as possible, he and his son Robb Stark set off towards the north. Go! The army in the north urgently needs to return home. The very important food in the fields is waiting for them to harvest. If it is too late, all the food will rot in the ground. Even Lady Catelyn, who was most worried about her daughter, did not stop her husband's decision. After being married to Eddard Stark for so many years, she had already understood how fragile the food security in the north was. The clan motto that the Starks have chanted for generations for thousands of years, "Winter is coming," is not an empty talk. Without enough food, under the most severe circumstances, 1/3 of the people in the north will survive. But winter. Therefore, all Starks in the past, whether he is the King of the North or the Duke of Winterfell, have regarded harvesting food as a top priority. Even during the Dance of the Blood Dragons, Duke Cregan Stark of the North, after carefully harvesting the food in the fields, they slowly and leisurely went south to participate in the war. Now, this problem is placed in front of Eddard Stark and his son Robb Stark. They have no choice but to immediately lead their army back north to collect food. White Harbor, with its wealth and rent and almost monopolizing trade between the Northern Territory and the Narrow Sea, hardly worries about this problem. For the trade city gang on Essos, food has never been a problem, as long as you can afford it. They are satisfied with the price. Moreover, the Manderly family, represented by Earl Wyman, controls the Twin River City, which means that once there is a food problem in the north, the Manderly family can control the price of food in the north. If Winterfell doesn't directly intervene, there won't be enough food in the north. Only I, White Harbor, have food. Do you want to buy it or not? Not long after Ed Stark left, 5,000 cavalry led by Clay arrived under the Twins. Looking at the mermaid flag fluttering in the wind over the Twins, Clay felt a little dazed. The last time he came here, the Frey family was still here and arrogant, but now he is the master of this city. At the gate of the city, the army was stationed. Clay did not let the army enter the city because the cavalry deviated from the King's Road and were only repairing here. Tomorrow morning, after the army had eaten and drank enough, they would continue to march north. After arranging many matters for defense and camp, Clay took Sir Malone and the two rode through the east gate of Twin City. In the hall, Clay only saw the old man and his sister Vera, who was fighting with chicken wings and had a greasy mouth. He did not see his sister Wilfield. The old man was still the same, always holding a bottle of very good summer red in his hand, enjoying a comfortable life. Suddenly he saw his grandson coming in, choked on the wine, and coughed violently. Clay had no choice but to walk a few steps behind the old man and patted him. When the old man calmed down, he found a seat and sat down as if he were in the old man's study. He opened a bottle of wine himself and drank too much. Vera glanced at the two drunkards, then looked at her grilled chicken wings, and thought the chicken wings were better. So she decided to ignore these two people for now, said hello to her brother, hugged her plate and left. Hall. The little girl is simple-minded, but she also knows that at this time, her brother and grandpa must have something important to say, and the affairs between the nobles will have an impact on her. He closed the door thoughtfully, leaving two evil-looking grandfather and grandson in the hall who only cared about themselves. Finally, after feeling that they were already a little drunk, the two of them put down their glasses in unison and looked at each other in silence. Finally, the two laughed loudly and bumped the wine bottles together. This was the unique way of greeting grandfather and grandson. Not bad, boy, really good. I really didn't see it before. You actually have such a strong battlefield talent. Tisk tisk. In one battle, you killed more than 10,000 Duke Tywin. By the 7 gods, I think now. It's incredible even thinking about it. The old man's tone was rather sighing. He was slightly older than Tywin. He had seen the Duke of Casterly Rock from beginning to end and had performed on the stage of the 7 Kingdoms for so many years. Count Wyman felt deeply about his skill, his iron-bloodedness, and his ruthlessness. But such a big shot from the 7 Kingdoms was beaten to the bone by his grandson in a battle. He was forced to sit at the negotiation table and was no longer as strong and domineering as before. There is also the Twin River City. The old man never dreamed that he would become the master of the Twin River City. When Clay's letter first arrived in White Harbor, he thought it was his grandson joking with him. The 7 gods, do you know how big the territory and population of Twin River City is? This kid really doesn't miss any opportunity for his own ambition. Grandpa, this is the biggest trophy of my trip south. How about it? Are you satisfied? The old man did not respond to his grandson's words, but opened another bottle of wine for him and pushed it down into his grandson's hand. After thinking about it, the old man asked, "Boy, you have to tell me what you were thinking next. Now everything in the family must match your actions. This time you have accumulated military merit and popularity in the war and also made the family great. It's expanded, but boy, it's not enough." Clay nodded. Of course he knew what the old man meant by not being enough, because no matter how much contribution Clay made, he belonged to the Northern Territory system. The more contributions he made, the more he would be in the system. The deeper it sinks. Galisos is growing up day by day, and there will come a time when the Little Sister Island will no longer be able to accommodate it. At that time, how will the Manderly family live in the Seven Kingdoms and in the north? This is an issue that must be considered. Before going south, the old man went to Changi Island to see Galisos. When he saw the huge figure soaring in the sky, his breathing almost froze. The dragon grew so fast, from being the size of an arm when Clay left, it has now become a behemoth that is twice as big as the largest horse, with a wingspan that casts a large shadow on the ground. Although the big blue gold guy is dangerously unnoticed, if it continues to grow at this rate, the dragon will have to eat more in order to grow. By that time, it will have no choice but to leave here. Therefore, as the owner of Clay's Galisos, Clay must make a decision. Due to the huge symbolic significance of the dragon, this will inevitably affect the future direction of the Manderly family. "Grandpa, when this matter is over, I will return to White Harbor, then go to Sister Island, take Galisos with me, and leave Westeros for a while." Clay thought about it, hesitated again, and finally decided to tell the old man in advance. The old man opened his eyes wide. Clay's answer was completely beyond his expectation. He immediately asked, "Where to go? If you leave Westeros at this time, what will happen if there is another war?" Clay knew that the old man was right to ask, but there were some things he had to do and he had no better time. "Grandpa, I am going to Essos to meet someone." "Who?" "Daenerys Targaryen, the Mad King's daughter, an exile from House Targaryen." Hearing this name, the old man's pupils suddenly shrank. Being well versed in the rules of the aristocratic game, he immediately realized what his grandson wanted to do. After a long time, the old man spoke with difficulty. "Do you want to revive the Targaryen dynasty and put the Mad King's daughter back on the throne, with your dragons?" "No, her dragon too." At Clay's words, the old man suddenly raised his head. He didn't know about Daenerys giving birth to 3 dragons. In fact, few people in Westeros knew about it. "What do you mean? Could it be that this is impossible?" "Nothing is impossible, Grandpa. You are not in the south, and you don't know some news. I have no choice but to go this time. Do you know where she is?" The old man already felt that his head could not keep up. The grandson in front of him was not thinking about Westeros, but in the territory of the Seven Kingdoms. "I'll know when I get there." "Then when you see her, what are you going to do?" "Find her out of those barbarian tents." The old man didn't know yet that Khal Drogo was dead, but Clay knew it better than anyone else. "Grandpa, the Horse King is dead. I want to bring her back. I don't care whether she has had a man or even a child. What I want is the top of her head. That top is better than Stanny's. Blue the stream of ritual is a much brighter crown." "You are right, Grandpa. My Manderly family has had no choice since the moment Galisos was born. So why don't I take a big gamble?" Clay knew that his words would take a long time for the old man to digest, but there was nothing he could do. Not to mention whether the current Galisos could defeat Daenerys' 3 dragons in a one-on-one fight. Even if he won, what's the use? Woolen cloth? Legal principles have a very strong market in Westeros. The Targaryen family ruled the Seven Kingdoms for 300 years. Although it collapsed, the concept of the red dragon flag on a black background representing the royal family is still buried in people's subconscious. If Clay uses Daenerys as a Targaryen to deal with the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms, the resistance will be much smaller and, if nothing else, Dorne will directly become their natural ally. Moreover, the surname Targaryen means the strongest claim to the Iron Throne. Why the Seven Kingdoms fell apart immediately after the death of Robert I has a strong connection with the fact that the person on the throne is not named Targaryen. When the Targaryen king dies, the next Targaryen succeeds. This is a matter of course and logic is the authority of law. However, after Robert I came to the throne, the logic of succession quietly changed because this is called winner take all. This gave a hint to the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms. Anyway, your Baratheon family also relied on rebellion to rise to power. It relied on nothing more than military strength. So why can't I, as long as I have troops? The identity of the king is no longer sacred because it is only linked to the number of troops. Westeros is now divided into pieces, which is the final product of this logic. Clay, tell me, you will marry her, right? What about your last name? I don't want to see my only heir become a Targaryen." The old man was silent for a long time, and suddenly asked his grandson in a faint tone. This was the question he was most concerned about in his heart. At this moment, he had accepted his grandson's idea, but he had to consider the inheritance of the family. "No, Clay Mandler, this is my name. Even if it is a god, it will not change. What I want is her crown, but I will never surrender to her." Seeing the old man's quietly relieved expression, Clay made a joke. "Don't worry, Grandpa, even if she is as beautiful as the legend, she is still the same to me. If the daughter of the Frey family could bring me a crown, I would be the son-in-law of the Frey family long ago." The old man smiled and clinked the bottle with his grandson. He had to digest this idea. Frankly speaking, he thought he was ready before. His granddaughter Wilfield had already followed the Starks to Winterfell. This was the result that he, Duke and Duchess Stark, agreed to, and the specific meaning of it was clear to anyone who had a little understanding of this matter between nobles. In the original arrangement of the old man, through this move and the friendship between Clay and Robb, the relationship between the Manderly and Stark families was completely tied up, just like the Stark and Tully families before. Later, when Clay returns, the existence of dragons and the support of Tully and the Stark family will make his situation much better. Didn't that stupid woman Lysa Tully keep out all threats with a bloody door? But now, dragons are back in the Erie's backyard. Lord Wyman believed that Lysa Tully would make her precious son Robert Arryn surrender to the new Dragon King. After taking the Vale, only the half-dead Westlands and the endless civil war were left in the Seven Kingdoms. Stormland. As for the Reach, where the birds are singing and the flowers are fragrant, under the threat of the dragon, they must still remember what the Raging Prairie War was like. In the end, there was only one Dorne left. At worst, he would send them the heads of the Magic Mountain. I believed that Prince Doran of Flowing Water Palace would not argue with him. But now, my plan and my grandson must be completely conservative and stop being conservative. I have been focusing on Westeros and completely ignored Essos on the other side of the narrow sea. With Targaryen's claim, not to mention anything else, Dorne will definitely stand behind him unconditionally. If what Sun Tzu said is true, then the number of dragons will no longer be one. This is a completely different concept. Earl Wyman carefully considered all possibilities. As the head of the family, he must use his 60 years of experience to give the most reasonable suggestions. As night fell, the candles in the hall burned slowly, and the old man's pensive face was hidden in the candlelight. He drank bottle after bottle of wine. Anyone who knew him well knew that this was the old man's habit when he was thinking. Clay didn't rush him, and drank wine himself, quietly waiting for the old man to think. At least this night, he had plenty of time. Finally, the old man drank a bottle of wine. The purple-red wine had completely wet his collar, but he didn't care. He took a deep breath, looked at his smiling grandson, and asked through gritted teeth, "Hurry, you will leave with the troops tomorrow, then return to White Harbor immediately, and take the dragon directly to Essos. You don't need to worry about it here. I have a hunch that the peace in the north is temporary. Clay, you must return to your family before war breaks out again." "Definitely, I promise," Clay said. Chapter 142 Return to White Harbor. This cavalry of 5,000 men, following their commander Clay Mandler all the way south, destroyed the city and conquered every enemy. Their great achievements in battle also meant that everyone was captured. They all thought that if there was another war in the future, they would follow Mr. Clay to rob those unlucky Southerners. Anyway, their army would be like a chicken and a dog in front of Mr. Clay, and they would be vulnerable. But there is no such thing as a banquet that lasts forever. After the army left the Twins and headed north along the King's Road through the Gulf of Calen, the time to say goodbye finally arrived. Here, Clay will lead all the cavalry of the Manderly family, leaving the large army and returning towards White Harbor at the mouth of the White Blay River in the east. The remaining people will continue their journey home. "Lord Severn, I leave this army to you. I finally brought everyone back, and I didn't let every household in the north hate me." Clay Manderly. Clay's tone was quite sad. It wasn't that he was too pretentious and couldn't stand the separation. It was just that as the commander of the army, he already liked the feeling of commanding the army, and the team under his command was also a team that could make him the powerful troops displayed. Now it's time for him to go home, and he doesn't know when he will be able to command such a powerful army again to defeat and annihilate the enemies standing in front of him. "Master Clay, you have returned to the north, that is, you are home. Now, it is time for you to leave. I have something to say that you may need to listen to." The Earl of Severn City, riding on a war horse wearing a horse armor with the emblem of the Severn family's battle axe, looked at the young man in front of him who had resigned as the commander of the cavalry group, but still looked sharp, and felt very envious. At his age, he usually played with his maid in bed every day. He was not married at that time, and it was the most carefree days. And this Lord Clay Manderly is only 18 years old, but he has already made military exploits for his family and the North that are envied by countless people in the war, and his military prowess has made countless people fear him. Lord Severn, of course I have time. White Harbor is in the east, and it can't escape. Clay smiled and drove his horse a few steps closer to the Earl. Along the way, Earl Severn and Earl Glover were the two northern nobles who followed him from beginning to end. At this time of course Clay wouldn't refuse if he had something to say. Earl Severn looked around and saw that the nearest guard was also 10 steps away. In the strong wind howling in the north, he probably couldn't hear what he and Clay were talking about, so he no longer hesitated, and his expression changed. Seriously, he opened his mouth and said, "Lord Clay, I know you didn't have too many selfish motives when you led the brothers south. You are a very good commander and can be a humble subordinate on the battlefield. I have no dissatisfaction at all. On the contrary, this is the responsibility of the gods. Grant me your favor." "Sir, it doesn't have to be like this. Everything was accomplished with our own lives. To put it this way, it's a bit too much." Clay waved his hand. Everyone broke up with countless enemies along the way and immediately parted ways. It would be meaningless to say these polite words anymore. "My lord, this is what I want to say. You don't have to be modest. You can annihilate more than 10,000 Lannister people, capture the Kingslayer alive, and finally rescue Lord Eddard Stark from Lord Tywin. Think about it. Which one you were not involved in?" Earl Severn stared into Clay's eyes and said slowly but firmly, "In fact, you participated in everything, and everyone knows very well that you take the most credit, and this, to some extent, is not a good thing for you." Clay understood what the other party wanted to say and was a little surprised. The Earl of Severn City was an interesting person. He could actually say these words to him sincerely. He couldn't do anything else. Looking at the vast wilderness in the north, Clay was silent for a while and then said calmly, "Lord Severn, I believe that Lord Stark is not that small-minded. They have ruled the north for thousands of years. They can't do such a thing if they turn against me just after I have accomplished my merits." Earl Severn did not argue with Clay because it was a fact. He nodded and shook his head. "Lord Clay, you are right. The Stark family, whether it is Lord Eddard or the already emerging Lord Robb, will not do anything to you directly, but they will be on guard against you, because you and the family is already too powerful." In Earl Severn's view, Clay Manderly and the Manderly family behind him are already on the edge of the cliff. The people of the north are quite xenophobic. They originally rejected the Manderly family who migrated from the Reach and still believe in the Seven Gods. But now, thanks to Clay's outstanding military exploits, the twins of the River Reach have been repelled. River City, like White Harbor, also falls under the Mermaid flag. Now, there is a question mark as to whether the Manderly family is still a northern family, and the huge size of the Manderly family will make these northern adults even more fearful. The reason why Earl Severn told Clay today was because he didn't want to see such a young man encounter the hostility of all the northern families in the future because of his mistakes. Clay and Earl Severn chatted a lot, but it was a pity that Clay could not find suitable wine as the army moved forward. Seeing that this Earl Severn, who was only half a day away from Winterfell and who was supposed to be a strong supporter of the Stark family, Clay couldn't help feeling that a war could really change a person. Didn't he know that he was already in the center of the whirlpool? Ed and his son didn't say a word, but there was no guarantee that they wouldn't have any thoughts in their hearts. No matter how upright a person is, if you sit in that position, you will definitely have something like this idea. This is not surprising. In addition, there is Lady Catelyn, who is fanning the flames with Theon Greyjoy, who she cannot deal with. Clay, the Manderly family, will definitely be in the hearts of the Stark family. Ed Stark is not Tywin, and the rainy season of Casmit will not befall the Manderly family. However, it is impossible for the family to make a difference in the future. The road to the north has brought him to the end, and in this dangerous gamble called Game of Thrones, the winner takes all, and if he doesn't advance, he retreats. Clay must find a second way for himself. After bidding farewell to Earl Severn, Clay took the family's cavalry and galloped away in the direction of White Harbor. He wanted to go home early. After all, he had had enough of dilly-dallying on the road, and there is still much to do. The old man did not go north with him. He wanted to stay in the Twin City to sort out the family's latest fiefdom. The old man also understood the current sensitive situation, so he must make the Manderly family as soon as possible to fill the gap left after the Frey family collapsed. A huge power vacuum. Only when all the fief forces are integrated and the Manderly family can assemble a strong army at any time can the family be truly safe, and no one dares to covet it easily. He has already given his granddaughter Willfield to the Stark family, which is a hostage to temporarily show weakness. As for whether she can obtain the position of future Mistress of the North, Earl Wyman did not force her. All the forbearance now is to buy enough time for the family. When the dragon returns from the Straight Sea and shocks the 7 countries with its roar, everything will be worth it. As the head of the family, he has no way out. His grandson cannot even lay. After 4 days of galloping, Clay finally saw the thick gray-white city wall on the outermost edge of White Harbor again, with the Manderly family's flag flying on the battlements. Clay stopped his horse and carefully observed everything in front of him. This was the starting point of his journey south. Now he finally came back. Behind him, the cheers of the White Harbor cavalry rang out. At first it was just a little bit, and finally it turned into a mountain. Drink like a tsunami. Of course they have reason to be happy. Although Clay led them to win the battle all the way, there is no undead person in the war. White Harbor also saw the death of his brother. Although no one said anything, this kind of precarious life, no one wants to last long. Now they finally returned home. The city walls of White Harbor gave them a great sense of security. Inside, their wives, children, father, mother, brothers, and sisters were all waiting for their return. For some reason, Clay suddenly remembered the young, unmarried guard he met outside the old man's study before leaving. He still remembered the shy guard's face when he introduced to him the small shield token given to him by his fiancée. Satisfied expression on the face. I don't know if he survived the war. Clay was the commander of the cavalry group. He didn't, and it was not appropriate to pay attention to his family's cavalry who was killed or still alive. After everything is settled, he might as well ask. If time permits before he leaves, he can serve as a witness for him and fulfill the promise he made to him, Clay thought in his heart. Come on, everyone, we're home. Clay turned around, raised his right fist and said loudly to the extremely excited cavalry behind him. His words made the White Harbor cavalry roar in agreement. They followed their young master's horses and rushed towards the west gate of the White Harbor city wall. Clay, you did a great job, the family is proud of you. As the man who stayed behind in White Harbor arranged by the old man, Willis Mandler formally welcomed the return of Clay, a great hero of the family, in the Mermaid Palace. It's a pity that Clay's father Wendell Manderly is still not here. As Stannis shrinks and gathers his fleet and heads towards King's Landing, the order on the east side of the strait completely collapses and pirates swarm. And arrived. The fleet heading to Pentos from White Harbor was robbed by pirates. The furious Sir Wendell rushed into the strait with the fleet from White Harbor, chasing these short-sighted pirates all over the world. Uncle, I just want to take a shower right now, and then give me a big plate of the most authentic cod in White Harbor. In the past, Vera always competed with me and she always couldn't finish the meal. Clay gave his uncle a bear hug, then helplessly spread his hands and pointed at his belly. Willis laughed loudly and said repeatedly, "It's easy. I'll order the kitchen to do it now. Our Manderly family, among other things, must not treat anyone badly when it comes to food. You go and wash yourself now. You don't have to worry about the rest. Just come here as soon as you're done, I'll definitely prepare it for you." Willis gave his nephew a guarantee. He originally thought that after Clay went out and was beaten in the bloody water, he would become very aggressive and stay away from strangers. When he was still young, his father Earl Wyman looked like that after he returned from participating in the Usurpers' War, and he still remembers it so well. But now it seems that Clay has not changed much. Apart from the fact that he can no longer see the youthfulness that a 17-year-old boy should have, Clay is still Clay, from every angle. Okay, let's talk about Uncle later. I'm going to wash myself first. If it weren't for the conditions in the military, I would have wanted to wash myself. I really can't stand the smell of myself. Oh, you really know how to enjoy it. Go quickly. Willis waved his hand indicating that Clay could leave. To be honest, he couldn't stand the very polluting smell of Clay. Even the incense in the Mermaid Palace couldn't suppress the smell. It was too strong. Exclamation after a refreshing wash, Clay changed 3 buckets of water in a row, and finally put on the aristocratic gown with complicated patterns and bright colors handed over by the servant, transforming himself from a blood-stained warrior back into a lovable one. The young master of Baigang. Oh, this is what I look like. My image management was really bad before. No, it needs to be improved. Also, this is the trouble of being single. If there is a woman, the Mandarin duck bath should be finished by now. Clay complained in his heart that he was really unqualified as a noble young master. If other noble young masters of his age were a little bolder, not to mention such outrageous operations as killing thousands of people, at least the maids around him would definitely be ruined. What's outrageous is that there are now several illegitimate children. Rich and powerful nobles have a natural advantage in this regard. You can understand it just by looking at how rich Tyrion's private life is. After cleaning up, it's time to eat. Clay has been eating dry food for more than a month and has not experienced the joy of eating for a long time. Now, he finally relaxed and thought about the level of the cooks in White Harbor. Clay stayed unsatisfactory saliva. Damn, I'm really hungry. He walked to the lobby of the Mermaid Palace and heard the long-lost calm Master Clay on the way. As soon as Clay arrived at the door, he smelled the aroma of food. Yes, this is the taste of fried cod. Today, no one can compete with me. Come on, Clay, I'll definitely have enough cod for you today. You can eat as much as you want. Willis sat in a high-backed chair and looked at Clay with a smile. The wine glass in his hand was shaking, and he pointed to the seat next to him. There was a large plate on the seat which was full of fried, crispy and browned cod. Strip. Very skillfully, he opened a bottle of the old man's treasure for his eldest nephew. Willis also picked up a leg of lamb and started fighting. The Manderly family's ability to fight for food was hard to find in the Seven Kingdoms. Neither of them spoke. They concentrated on the food on the plate, taking a big bite when they were thirsty, and then continued fighting. When the battle came to an end, Clay leaned back comfortably in his chair, smacking the taste in his mouth, and finally felt completely relaxed. Clay, my father wrote to me saying that after you come back, I will be responsible for everything. You will be leaving soon. Where are you going? Clay took a napkin, wiped the grease from the corners of his mouth, took a long breath, and spit out a name. Essos chapter 143 Accident. Before leaving at night, the sea breeze was blowing gently. At the top of Poseidon Tower, the house that Clay had set on fire to hatch Galisos had been thoroughly cleaned by Count Wyman and restored to its original appearance. At the dinner table in the evening, Uncle Willis did not show too much surprise that Clay was going to Essos, although he did not know what Clay had arranged on eldest sister island. In his opinion, his nephew has become the pillar of the family who can take charge of his own affairs. To a certain extent, he understands the old man's thoughts better than himself, and Willis also has his own considerations. Although the old man will kick off his legs to meet the seven gods one day, and the title of Earl of White Harbor will fall on his head, Willis for the time being, he himself understands that his body cannot support such a big person no matter what. Of the Manderly family, therefore, including himself, his younger brother Wendell, and the old man, they all acquiesced, skipped Willis, and provided all the family's resources to Clay, the third-generation heir. Willis himself had no objection to this arrangement. In his opinion, the seven gods had already given him 2 daughters. It was his destiny not to have a boy. There was no need to compete with such a dazzling nephew. Whatever he wants to do on the premise of ensuring the interests and safety of the family, he can do whatever he wants, and he will fully support it. Under this general premise, Clay's trip to Essos was not hindered in the slightest. However, before actually leaving Westeros, Clay had to make some arrangements to feel at ease. Look at it this way, White Harbor is really beautiful. I've been in Westeros for so long, and I haven't taken a closer look at this port. Now, I'm leaving again. Tisk, I, the young master of White Harbor, am really it's not worthy of its name. In White Harbor at night, in addition to the dots of lights, the lighthouse outside the harbor is still shining tenaciously, guiding several captains who dare to enter the harbor at night to the dock for unloading. Now, the seven kingdoms from south to north, except for the northernmost North Territory and the southernmost Dorne, are all caught in the flames of war. Even the Riverlands, which has an armistice with the Western Territory, has been destroyed because of the army. Bandits are now rampant and civilians are crying everywhere. The Iron Fleet of the Iron Islands is busy trying to capture a few more fortresses along the coast of the west before Lord Tywin's reinforcements arrive in the west. Anyway, the adults in the west have a lot of golden dragons in their warehouses. The fleet of the River Bend was moved near Storm's End by their king Renly to prevent his good brother Stannis from raiding the empty Baratheon family castle from the sea. As for Stannis himself, under the persuasion of the Onion Knight, he decided to put the witch Melisandre, who had been persuading him not to land rashly, on Dragonstone Island, and gathered all the fleets to rush towards King's Landing. As a result, there is actually no fleet that can move freely on the entire east coast of Westeros, except for the Manderly family fleet in White Harbor. Therefore, the trade in White Harbor has become more and more prosperous at this time when the Seven Kingdoms are at war. At least, the business in King's Landing and Stormlands is no longer possible. There is only Seagull Town, which still faces Stan at any time. The royal fleet of Nice was surrounded. Don't think that Stannis is as stubborn as a stinking stone in a latrine, and he will be rigid and unchangeable. Although he takes the law as important, in the current environment, as long as the ship you come to Westeros is loaded with its useful materials such as food, Stannis deducts it from you without any negotiation. Therefore, the trade between the Trade City Gang and the east coast of Westeros was almost completely cut off. Merchant ships came to White Harbor one after another. White Harbor made a lot of money just by collecting taxes. It can be said that the longer the war drags on, the better it will be for White Harbor, but now, Clay has to leave here. Before leaving, he had a few things to do. First, he had to compile an outline of Witcher potions and training methods. The family needed to send people to collect the potions. After this battle, I believe that there will be no one left in the two territories of the Riverlands and the North dare to rob the Manderly family's caravan. Second, Clay must deal with the White Sea Guards. These people were somewhat useful before the war, but they were of little use once the war came. Clay decided to adjust their methods, and the objects of surveillance also had to change. Thirdly, as the de facto commander-in-chief of the White Harbor Army, he still had to organize the army and hand it over to his father Wendell, who was busy chasing pirates all over the world. The old man from Twin City took away 1,000 people, so what? Not enough. Clay must ensure that once the South encounters a surprise attack, White Harbor can quickly pass through Bite Bay and deliver 2,000 troops toward the Twins. Being in the unlucky place of the Riverlands, all these preparations and plans must be made. Again, there is no shortage of food in White Harbor, which is why Clay dared to do this so boldly. After finishing these things, Clay couldn't waste any time. He had to leave for Changi Island immediately. According to the old man, Galisos was already old enough to be ridden. In this case, Clay didn't have to take it by boat to Erebus. Suze. Moving a chair and sitting on the highest place in White Harbor, Clay imagined what Galisos would look like when he grew up. To be honest, what would this giant dragon that had never appeared in history look like when it grew up? Majestic look? Clay felt that Galisos' newly hatched blue scales dotted with golden stripes should look better than Daenerys' 3 dragons. To be honest, although he has some inherent impressions of Daenerys in his heart, who knows what kind of mother of dragons Clay will be able to see during this trip to Essos. Regardless of whether she is as beautiful as the rumors say, in fact, with Clay's current status, to a certain extent, he is a noble on the same level as Edmure Tully and Robb Stark. Moreover, he has no engagement and no historical baggage to carry. As long as he lets it out and says that he wants to find a beautiful wife, don't worry, anyone in the 7 kingdoms who thinks his daughter can take advantage of her will come. Give White Harbor a try. Just kidding, the Manderly of today is not the Manderly of the past. The Manderly family, which owns White Harbor and the Twins, which together cover 2/3 of the land the size of the Riverlands, is one of the 7 kingdoms, one of the most powerful nobles in the world. Moreover, there is Clay, a young heir who is good at fighting. Who wouldn't want to win over such a family? If he can marry a daughter to become the future mistress, it will be a huge improvement to the strength of his family. Therefore, as long as Clay wants to, he will never be short of women. But the problem is that none of these women can provide him with enough help to realize his ambitions. Throughout the 7 kingdoms, Shag Greyjoy, whom Clay had met once before, gave Clay the impression that she was a female pirate. Moreover, Clay felt that her openness in her private life was a bit too much. As for the Riverlands, Hoster Tully was Edmure's precious son. One of his 2 daughters was Robert's mother, Lady Catelyn, and the other was the mistress of the Eyrie. He was devoted to Littlefinger's Lysa Tully. Clay has no sexual interest in women of his age. As for the Reach, well, our Rose of Highgarden, Miss Marguerite Tyrell, is probably looking at her nominal husband at this time, and her brother Loras, the Knight of Flowers, is inseparable every day, staying alone in an empty house and a living widow. Speaking of Dorne, the Sand Snakes are said to be good-looking, but none of them are direct descendants. As for Prince Doran's daughter Arianne, a lord in the north wants a daughter of Dorne. To be honest, it's really hard to have little help. When the war breaks out, let's talk about a practical issue. How do the armies of both sides coordinate and command? It takes more than a month for a raven to come and go. Even if Clay has a dragon, he can't use 2 pieces of land as a messenger. There is no such thing as this war. Law fight. Finally, there is the Stark family, Lord Eddard's 2 precious daughters, Sansa Stark and Arya Stark. Not to mention the younger one, Clay doesn't even know where she is now. It was not that Clay had never considered becoming Duke Ed's son-in-law, but this idea was completely abandoned after the old man asked his sister Wilfield to be taken away by Duke Ed. He understood the old man's helplessness. During this sensitive period, the Manderly family had to hand over a hostage like the Stark family. Clay certainly couldn't do it, so it would have to be his sister Wilfield's turn. As for whether she will be a maid in the Stark family or become Robb Stark's woman, no matter what, with the Clay and Manderly families around, no one dares to bully her. Duke Ed is not stupid, letting Wilfield be bullied. Once Clay finds out, this will create trouble for the sensitive relationship between the 2 parties. There is a rumor circulating among the princes in the north that the reason why Clay used such cruel methods against the Frey family is because a certain son of the Frey family wanted to marry Wellfield or Vera. He must have said something that made Clay Manderly lose his temper and kill the Frey family personally. A fire completely burned a prosperous family into a piece of history. Ash. After thinking about it, it's really funny that Clay can't find a suitable marriage partner in Westeros. The sea breeze lifted his forehead, and the moonlight stretched his shadow very long on the stone floor. After shouting for so long, he rarely found a moment of silence. However, this silence was soon broken by the sound of footsteps coming from the spiral staircase. The Witcher's hearing was very keen. The sound was still far away from the top floor, but Clay could hear it clearly. Shoo! Clay didn't recognize the footsteps, but he wasn't nervous. First, he kept his sword in his hand. This was a habit left over from all the wars. Second, this is the Poseidon Tower, the core of the entire Manderly family. Who dares to plot evil here? Clay sat calmly in his chair, his eyes still fixed on the night below, which looked a little erratic in the port. He was looking forward to who this visitor was. Come up. It's okay. Clay said something to the door of the circular staircase. He heard something interesting from the visitor's footsteps, because the closer the footsteps came to him, the more hesitant they seemed. In the end, they simply stopped. It seems that this last step weighs 1,000 pounds. Sir, I'm sorry to bother you so late. The voice in the darkness was young and somewhat familiar, with an unconcealed panic, as if he was afraid of meeting Clay. It's okay. Come here and get a chair by yourself. It's an interesting thing because someone can't sleep like me at night. Besides, it's not convenient for others to see you clearly if you always stand in the dark, right? Clay smiled and pointed to his side. No matter who it was, he must be looking for something in the middle of the night, and it was probably something he couldn't talk about during the day. The cold moonlight finally shone on the visitor's face. Clay glanced sideways and suddenly understood why he came to Poseidon Tower, and no one stopped him all the way to him. This person was the guard Clay met at the door of the old men's study before he left. He had talked to him about the love token from his fiancée and promised him to be his witness. He came to him. At this time, Clay definitely didn't believe that he was looking for him to fulfill his promise to host his wedding. Although Clay would definitely complete it, he believed that the guard would not be stupid until midnight because this comes to you. Sit down, don't be formal, you know what I am like in the family, there's no need to be so nervous, right? Clay remembered correctly, the guard named Juventus did not relax much because of the young master's words. He pulled a stiff smile on his face, moved a chair, and gently placed it beside Clay. Only half of the butt is resting on the chair. He knew that in the family, especially in ordinary times, Clay didn't have the airs of a noble young master. There was no need to be too polite when dealing with him, as that would only arouse the young master's disgust. Tell me, if you have anything to do, come to me. I think your fiancé shouldn't be so anxious and come to me to host your wedding, right? If you are too anxious, it doesn't matter. I can go tomorrow, but you have to give me a charter. Clay smiled and tapped his fingers on the armrests of the chair, waiting for the other party's answer. He was really curious about what kind of answer the Juventus guard would give him. So you were joking, Mana? No, don't be in a hurry, Juventus explained awkwardly, the corners of his mouth twitching. Obviously, it was a very painful thing for him to tell the purpose of tonight. Clay waited patiently without looking at him. He originally wanted to take a good look at the night view of White Harbor tonight, and he had plenty of time. Sir, do you think that those who kill their relatives will really be rejected by the gods and unable to integrate into their embrace after death? Juventus was silent for a long time, his face constantly changing in the night sky, and finally he spoke, asking Clay a very strange question. Parricide? This question made Clay frown. He looked sideways at Juventus and replied, it's best for people to live in the present. It's meaningless to think so much about what happens after death. If you don't understand it, how can you talk about death? There was another long suffocating silence. Clay didn't know what kind of help or hindrance his answer would bring to Juventus, because he had no idea what Juventus was thinking. My lord, I report to you, my brotherly, he's the eyes of the Southerners doing things for them. As soon as the tapping fingers stopped, Clay twitched the corner of his mouth. This is interesting. Chapter 144 The hardest choice is Juventus' brother a spy? No wonder Juventus would choose to come to him at night. Clay became interested in this matter. Although the White Sea Guards repeatedly assured him that White Harbor was relatively clean, they found all the Southern spies in White Harbor, sent them to the dungeon in Wolf's Lair for interrogation, and finally pulled them out to find a tree and hang them. Done. Clay has been silent on this statement and has no comment. He does not think that the Southern gentlemen are fools. The former White Harbor was not a place that was too small to deserve attention. Now, as the core of the Manderly family that spans the two rivers in the north, it is strange that White Harbor has not been penetrated. However, he didn't expect that just one day after he returned to White Harbor, he would hear news about the Southern spies from Juventus, a guard who could enter and leave the Poseidon Tower at any time. Tell me, how did you determine that your brother has the eyes of a Southerner? This is a crime that is enough for him to be dragged out and beheaded without repentance. Clay calmed down the expression on his face and calmly told Juventus the consequences of this matter. He must make it clear to Juventus. As a lord, this is his responsibility. I know, sir, my brother Ali, because he is tall and has good swordsmanship, he and I were both recruited when you went south this time. You know that no one in our White Harbor will refuse, otherwise we will just hang out here. Can't go down anymore. Clay nodded. This is the case in White Harbor or the entire Northern Territory. If the Lord recruits you, if you are not disabled or too old to move, refusing to be recruited will make everyone look down on you. Erie was recruited as an infantryman and followed Lord Rob south to fight Lord Tywin. On the battlefield, there were no swords and no eyes. When I went back, he had broken 2 legs and was lying on the bed. The neighbors had been taking care of him. While I was packing his things, I accidentally lifted up a piece of dirty carpet, and there was a basement underneath, and I found something in there. I found a key, which is exactly the same as the one on my waist that can enter the Poseidon Tower. I also found a box, which contains some information about you, my lord, and the members of the Manderly family. I didn't touch his things before. If I hadn't taken care of him and packed his things this time and couldn't find these things, I'm afraid he would have been doing it for a long time. Juventus finished speaking in one breath and let out a long breath. These words were held in his heart and he finally said them out. This made him extremely comfortable, even though Ali was his brother. Clay thought carefully. I'm afraid this matter is not that simple. He asked, Ewan, does your brother Ali usually live with you? No, we have separated a long time ago. He has a bad personality. As soon as we meet, we can't say a few words, but we will quarrel over which is better between the north and the south. He always yearns for the life in the south. Juventus replied with some loneliness. He didn't understand why his brother was so stubborn before, but now it seems that his brother has long lost his heart in the south. Okay, assuming what you said is right, and your brother Ali really has eyes from the south, then this raises 2 questions. First, why did he do this, and who asked him to do it? Second, how did he spread the news? Clay has no way of getting the answer to the first question now. He can only get the answer from Ali's mouth. But for the second question, Clay probably has a guess in his mind. Because the transportation conditions are extremely backward, for long-distance communication, especially between the north and the south, there is no other possibility for timely communication except ravens. Then the question comes again. In the entire White Harbor, who else can effectively use the raven, except the old man who has mastered it personally? In Clay's mind, he thought of a figure in gray robes with jingling chains hanging around his neck. Yes, it must be him. However, Clay was a little curious as to how this person could hide it from everyone. Who did this right under your nose? If it was really him, then Ali was definitely not alone. How much could he find out by himself? Clay regretted a little. When he was in Poseidon Tower, why didn't Clay give this blonde and blue-eyed bachelor a mark of Yaxi? Maybe he would gain something at that time. Interestingly, this time when I came back, I encountered this incident. Clay really wanted to know who drove such a big nail into his own territory. Although this is a Lannister, he may not necessarily send the message to the Lannister. Who was behind him is really interesting. He is leaving soon, and this matter must be resolved. Otherwise, if the news of his departure is leaked, and the old man is not in begging, the family will be in a very delicate position. Clay looked at the city wall of White Harbor. This thick white wall could block the frontal attack of 10,000 troops, but it could not block the infiltration of people with ulterior motives from all directions. Clay once again felt that this city wall could not give him any sense of security. Think about the tunnels extending in all directions under the Red Keep of King's Landing where 8-clawed spiders were entrenched and spinning webs. As the king of a country, the voice of communicating feelings with his queen can be heard by others through a thin wall. Isn't this creepy? If King's Landing is like this, how can we expect that other places will be so strong that a needle cannot be inserted or water cannot be poured in? Regarding Clay's question, Juventus answered with great pain. To be honest, he thought that the mysterious box would contain a letter from his younger brother, a bachelor, who missed a certain girl. But when he saw the contents inside, he really wished he had never seen these papers and never opened this box. However, as the senior guard of the Manderly family, he hesitated again and could not accept that he did not know these things at all. What his brother did was completely detrimental to White Harbor, the Manderly family, and it's not good for the young master. He didn't know who to talk to about this matter. After spending what was probably the longest afternoon in his life, and unable to eat a bite at night, he finally stayed up until the dead of night and came to the Poseidon Tower to meet Clay. Master. He himself was unwilling and didn't know how to face his younger brother, so he gave the decision-making power to Clay. He would do whatever the young master said. In this way, he could slightly alleviate the pain in his heart. Master, I don't know, I really don't know. He is disabled now. As for who he contacted in the past, I didn't ask him. He doesn't know that I already know about him. Yaowen shook his head bitterly. After discovering the key in the box in the corner, he was shocked and panicked, but the strong psychology on the battlefield quickly made him calm down, and he pretended that nothing happened and recovered. Things. Therefore, until now, his brotherly does not know that his identity has been exposed. It is no wonder that he was recruited in a hurry and had no time to pack up his things. Moreover, he has a withdrawn personality and is the kind of character that no one likes. No one will come to his home. Who would have known that after leaving and coming back, I would have left my legs on the battlefield, and I could only lie on the bed and look helplessly at the dusty roof. What do you want me to do? You know that from my position and my position, Juventus, your brotherly will definitely suffer his punishment. You know very well that we Northerners are very strict with traitors. What an attitude. Clay looked into Juventus's eyes. Those eyes that were constantly dodging showed pain, anger, and sadness, but more importantly, deep helplessness. Clay could see it. Master, I want to ask you to give Ali a dignity. No matter what he has done in the past, he at least gave his 2 legs for the North on the battlefield. Clay raised a hand to stop what Juventus wanted to say next. He could guess what Juventus, his elder brother, would do next, because he could come to him today and he had actually made a choice in his heart. He would say that after Ali explained everything he knew, Juventus would personally send his brother to the arms of the 7 gods. He would not allow himself to ignore everything his brother had done in the past. But he is Ali's brother after all, and he wants his brother to leave this world with dignity as a warrior, instead of being a traitor who is spurned by everyone and left in the wilderness to be eaten by wild beasts. Clay suddenly understood why Ed Stark valued honor so much. Emotions were not an isolated phenomenon. Throughout the North, many people put the honor of themselves and their families or relatives at an intolerable level. Loss of status. Just like Juventus came to him today, if it were Clay, he would definitely not do this. In his opinion, family must be much more important than the illusory, so-called honor. However, no matter what, he has to thank Juventus for his discovery. The old man has always wanted to find an opportunity to deal with this Lannister right under his nose. Now, he has given himself a good reason. Moreover, when dealing with this Ali himself, he certainly cannot just pull him out of bed, and then hold a public trial to make him reveal his so-called crime of colluding with the Southerners. In that case, Juventus will probably have to leave Beidou with hatred for himself. Hong Kong is a place like this. Okay, I know what you mean. Don't mention this to anyone. You don't have to do anything with your brother Ali. By the way, when will the wedding of you and your fiancé be held? Juventus opened his mouth slightly, obviously not keeping up with his young master's thinking. He replied dryly, Master, we have agreed that we will get married as soon as I come back, but no one knows that this happened, and I don't even know how to tell Mana. Needless to say, the wedding will go ahead as usual. I'll give you a day tomorrow to prepare and send the charter to me. The day after tomorrow, I will host your wedding. By the way, I'll meet you, this unlucky brother with a bad mind. Master, this is my will, you just do it. Whether Ali can have an ending that is good for everyone depends on him. Be careful, Juventus. Although I am very grateful to you for saying this to me today, but I want to remind you that just because the key to the Poseidon Tower was secretly copied by others, I won't be able to chop you off if you grow another head. Juventus was stunned on the spot. This afternoon, his sense of justice and responsibility for his brother had been at war in his heart. He completely forgot that he also had a huge responsibility in this matter. After a long time, he replied in despair. I understand, Master Clay. He did not call Master Clay again. Leave Juventus guard. Clay said lightly, as if he had just revealed his plan to interrogate someone else's brother at someone else's wedding banquet and it had nothing to do with him. The stopped fingers started tapping on the armrest again. Clay knew that it must be very inhuman to do this, but why didn't Clay do this? Who knows what information this Ali stole from the family through the key he copied from Juventus? To put it bluntly, if this matter had been any other lord, Juventus and his brother Ali would have been hanged immediately, and none of them would be able to escape. Clay could ask Juventus to leave and he would deal with this matter himself later. It's already considered a mercy. But Clay's kindness only ends here. He is a lord and the young master of the Manderly family. He has no extra kindness to share with a small guard, even if this guard has just proved his loyalty. Clay didn't have any extra time to waste on them. He had promised to be their witness, so he would do it, but for other things, they didn't deserve Clay's more attention. He had more things to do, including issuing the latest mission to the White Sea Guards, handing over his own army, and making arrangements for his demon hunter team during his absence. For a spy, one shot of the Yaxi seal will reveal everything, and after that, this Ali will have no value to Clay. A person who lost his legs in the war and completely lost his ability to move cannot be engaged in so-called espionage activities. Clay doesn't mind whether such a person dies or not, but the big net behind him is Clay must uproot his legacy and leave no trace behind. This is his style. Clay will be at the wedding banquet, serving as a witness for Juventus and dealing with Ali. He doesn't have so much time to go back and forth to the home of an ordinary guard in the port area. After that, he has to greet our bachelor Yomer cordially and see what tricks this taciturn and fearful bachelor is playing on himself. Clay felt intimately that knowledge has no position, but bachelors do. For the first time, the idea of abolishing the bachelor system arose in his heart. Let such a group of people go deep into the fortress of the nobles and be directly responsible for the life and health of the nobles and the sending and receiving of letters. Even if most people can abide by the bachelor's oath, there will always be restless ones, and as a lord, I don't know who there is such an idea. This section will be over soon. After all, it is definitely not appropriate to just ride on a dragon and leave without doing anything. For this, I have to kill a bachelor, and then let me tell you, I have been attending classes this month. While working and typing, my whole body feels numb. Updates are guaranteed every day, but double updates will have to wait until next month for me to adjust. Chapter 145 Mission Army Expansion. Sea Power. Clay issued the order overnight, and the family guards broke into Meister Yomer's room and took him into custody without listening to his explanation. The raven in his hand was also taken away from him. This was to prevent him from sending any more messages to the outside world. Clay did not order a search of Meister Theodore's personal belongings or letters. The old man had done this many times. No flaws were found in him, so this time, Clay didn't expect any direct evidence. After Clay has finished dealing with Ali's side, he will have to take care of this mess. Early the next morning, Clay rode straight to the wolf's den. He had a lot to do today. The blood-red gemstone ring on his hand made all the guards who saw it bow and salute. Clay went straight to the back of the wolf's lair to the main castle of the White Sea Guards. All the intelligence managers who received the news put down their work and quickly headed towards the conference room where the commander was. They knew that the commander led his troops back to White Harbor yesterday, but they did not expect to come here today. Sitting in the chair, looking calmly at the familiar figures filing in, Clay waited for them to sit down and said in a calm tone without sadness or joy, "Everyone, you are all here. You have done well during my absence." The people present were all smart people, and no one would really take this as a compliment. Moreover, they also knew very well that they did not play a big role in the commander's journey south. The few that were effective were arranged by the commanders themselves before leaving, and those they commanded and monitored did not play any role at all. When did the Kingslayer leave King's Landing and go to the west to lead the army? Their people in King's Landing gave no such information at all. The White Sea Guards have no idea what happened to Eddard Stark after he escaped from King's Landing. Also, when Clay, the commander of the White Sea Guards, led his troops to the city walls of Twin Rivers, he had no way of effectively commanding the White Sea Guards as to what preparations they had in the city and how they were going to act. After he sneaked into Twin River City on his own and met the commander of the White Sea Guards of Twin River City with great luck, he took over the White Sea Guards in the city again, and then he cooperated inside and outside to attack Twin River City. The intelligence network they originally built was too slow to transmit news and could not keep up with the speed of Clay's horses. It can be said that in this battle south, it was Clay who was leading the hounds, not the hounds for their masters. Pathfinding. This is a big problem. Clay is dissatisfied with the results of their work. It is really normal. Clay withdrew them and they couldn't even say a word. "Sir, we didn't do well, please forgive me." Steward Snow, as the more prestigious one among the several stewards, saw that no one spoke, so he had no choice but to speak up. After hearing what he said, Clay sneered, waved his hands, and the temperature of his voice dropped instantly, and he said, "What's the point of me forgiving you? What's the point of me just pushing you out and chopping them up? What I want is the result, the information you got me. Understand, everyone. Your own heads are not that important. Whether it can rest firmly on your shoulders depends on your achievements. You are not here to beg for mercy." The stewards didn't say anything. They didn't want to get into trouble with the commander now. This commander was not a noble young master who lived deep in the castle and could only give orders. He was a ruthless man who personally led his troops south and killed more than 10,000 Lannister people without anyone's help. He could kill so many people without blinking an eye. How could he kill himself? There was half hesitation. Since you didn't do well, then don't say anything. Let the commander do whatever he says. I have other things to do, so I won't talk nonsense with you here. Now put your thoughts aside and obey my orders. Clay slammed the hand with the ring that symbolized the power of the White Sea Guards on the table. You don't have to worry about King's Landing. Let the three kings named Baratheon fight for that stinking city. It has nothing to do with us anymore. You send me people to garrison Harrenhal. Remember, once enemies from the south besiege Harrenhal, send a message to White Harbor or Twins immediately. Remember, it is immediately. Don't delay it for me. The Iron Islands are now attacking the Western Territory head to tail. This is the best opportunity for you to infiltrate into the Western Territory. Remember, no matter if the Iron Islands are defeated or the Western Territory is defeated again, report them all to me. Finally, please pay attention to Duke Ed's physical condition. I always feel that something is wrong with him. Can Lannister put him back so easily? As for the Valley, Clay didn't mention it. They are probably already in a quarrel internally. Under the leadership of Lysa Tully, they insist on implementing the shrinking turtle policy of closing the Blood Gate. On the other side, some people, led by the Royce family, firmly opposed this slow death policy and insisted on participating in the war. The Valley has the most powerful cavalry in the Seven Kingdoms, but they choose to huddle behind the Blood Gate and watch as the blood flows across the Seven Kingdoms. Clay didn't know if Littlefinger had already arrived at the Eyrie to deal with Lysa Tully, who loved him regardless of anything else. If so, then the Valley is a constant source of instability, because no one can tell when Littlefinger will let the Valley cavalry rush out of the Blood Gate. He now has no way to contact the opposition led by the Royce family. He really has no good solution for the Valley at the moment. The resistance of the Alliance of Justice in his memory also came to nothing. Littlefinger still has considerable control over the private land of Arryn Valley, and Clay has no intention of forcing his way in to attract Littlefinger's Lord Petter's attention. It's not that I'm afraid of him, but that I'm leaving soon and there's really no need to play happily with him at this point in time. After that, I will leave White Harbor for a period of time. All your reports, as well as the command of the entire White Sea Guard, will be temporarily handed over to Lord Wyman. However, the orders I gave you must be strictly implemented. I don't want to see any don't let me slack off anymore. As you command, Commander. Clay is leaving soon, and there is no extra time to clean up the White Sea Guards from top to bottom. Therefore, now we can only use the previous structure, completely abolish their own power of blind command, and focus on those few. Very important point. Coming out of the Wolf's Den, Clay didn't waste any time, and directly found Sir Malone, who had returned to White Harbor with him. Uncle Willis, as the General Guard of White Harbor, was not good at commanding troops. Clay must hand over the military power to a man, someone you can trust. After much deliberation, there is only one person in White Harbor, Sir Malone, who is suitable for this position. The rest cannot restrain these arrogant generals who have made great achievements in battle with Clay. Sir Malone, who is as old as his father, is staying on the school grounds at this time, watching some young boys training in swordsmanship. He has loved this all his life and his interest is still unabated. Seeing Clay coming to see him, he also knew what he was here for. On the way back from Callum Bay, Clay talks to him once. Although he didn't tell him what he was going to Essos for, he told him in advance. Said this. Clay, are you done with the matter there? Come on, let's go to another place. This place is full of ashes caused by these boys. The old Jazz laughed, stood up from where he was sitting, kicked a kid whose movements were obviously deformed, and then led Clay towards a deserted place. Clay's departure from White Harbor, or even Westeros, is a top-secret matter within the family. It can be allowed to be leaked, but it must be long after Clay is left. Now, it is absolutely not allowed. The Riverlands and the current Tully family are like a beautiful woman with half-undressed clothes, surrounded by a group of men with red eyes. The reason why they did not rush to execute her on the spot is because there is a person behind this woman. The vicious brother. And the North is this brother, Clay, is the symbol of this brother's evil spirit. Now, if he leaves Westeros and this news is leaked, there is no guarantee that no one will have evil thoughts about the Riverlands. If nothing else, his old man is in the Riverlands. Therefore, Lee and the Lannister Meisters and Clay behind him must be dealt with and at least ensure that the area around Poseidon Tower is clean during this period. Sir Malone led Clay to the second floor of Poseidon Tower, a relatively quiet balcony where no one was disturbed and the view was very good. Anyone who wanted to peek here would be discovered immediately. Okay, Clay, tell me carefully, if you leave, how long will it take for you to come back? I don't ask you what you are going to do. You decide what to do. Your grandfather and I support you, and the family is your backing. Clay smiled and looked at the quiet garden outside the balcony, where a maid was cleaning fallen leaves. When she looked up, she found Master Clay looking at her. She quickly lowered her head, pretending not to see Clay. However, her clutching the hand on the broom had turned red due to exertion, the same color as her exposed face. Sir Malone also noticed this. The old sir pursed his lips and turned towards Clay, laughing in a low voice. Do you know how popular you are in our White Harbor and even in the entire Northern Territory? Clay shook his head and smiled. Forget it, my family will agree to whoever I choose. There is no one suitable for me in the entire 7 kingdoms. Oh, you are so loud. The king is not as powerful as you. The old Jazz chuckled, taking Clay's words as a joke, but as he spoke, his voice became silent, because he thought about it in his mind, as if what Clay said was really right. The old knight was a little embarrassed, and muttered, "This is really true. It's better not to fight this battle. At least your kid doesn't have to worry about getting married immediately." He looked calm and said seriously, "Clay, no matter what, the family must have an heir. You must consider your marriage partner. You must understand what the old man means when he gives Willfield to Stark." When it comes to this, Clay becomes a little angry, not because the old man let his sister Willfield be taken away by the Stark family, but because he is not strong enough and needs to be controlled by others. If Galisos was the size of the Black Death, would the Manderly family still give Willfield to the Stark family? At that time, it will be Willfield who chooses her favorite person in Westeros, instead of like this now. This is the helplessness of the family's lack of strength. I understand, Sir Malone. Grandpa and I have already made plans for this matter. Don't worry, the Manderly family will definitely continue to be passed down in my hands. I have no doubt about this. Okay, let's not talk about this. Now you tell me what the regulations are for the army you brought back. It is really a pity that they have put down their weapons and gone home now. Clay nodded and agreed with Sir Malone's statement. He said, "Sir, during my absence, the people who came south with me were all veterans who had seen blood. Especially these hundreds of cavalry, they followed me from beginning to end. I told them that they were not allowed to go home to farm. As compensation, military pay will be doubled. Also, the family's current financial resources are enough to expand our cavalry team. You should keep this in mind and try to expand our cavalry team as much as possible. As for the infantry, just keep it at its current size." Sir Malone had no objections to Clay's arrangement and agreed immediately. He followed Clay all the way and knew what a terrifying force this kid would be on the battlefield if he held a powerful cavalry in his hands. The name Clay Manderly can be remembered by the men of the 7 kingdoms because of the cavalry in his hands and the result of completely showing his power in front of the Lannister. Okay, I understand. You are still very good at leading cavalry. I will definitely not hold you back, okay? Yes, and it's more important than what happened just now. Clay stopped his smile and became extremely serious. He said, "Sir Malone, I want you to do your best to build a fleet that can compete with Stannis' royal family. In addition to maintaining the family's operation, I want you to invest all the golden dragons in it." This request was completely beyond Sir Malone's expectation. In his mind, Clay would definitely expand his power, but it was on land. He really didn't expect that Clay would ask him to come out early. A royal fleet came out. Why, maintaining such a large fleet will put a lot of financial pressure on the family. This is equivalent to investing more than half of the entire White Harbor tax revenue. Sir Malone's eyebrows almost flew up. He couldn't understand Clay's request at all, but it's not his fault. The nobles in Westeros rarely set their sights on the sea, so no one understands sea power. The value of. For most nobles, even if their family is close to the sea, with this money, they can get one more cavalry without adding an extra piece of wood to the ship. But Clay never considered this issue. If he could gain control of the sea, even if the dragon was not as effective as expected due to various possible black technologies in the future, Clay would still be invincible in the war. As long as they can gain control of the seas on both sides of Westeros, guess how many people the nobles will leave to visit their homes? Casterly Rock, the Academy, King's Landing, Storm's End, etc. Which one is not close to the sea? Even in the valley, if you land from the sea, the Bloodgate natural barrier is just a decoration. It can be said that if the North had a maritime force the size of the Royal Fleet on the west coast before the war started, the Lannister would be able to pull out at most 20,000 people, and the remaining 10,000 people would have to stay to guard the long coastline. Because you can't guess where I will land, and the troop transport speed is much faster at sea than on land. Before the fight even begins, I will hold at least 1/3 of your strength in place and prevent you from moving. This is the power of sea control. This is the last manuscript in my hand. I have been taking exams these days and have to go to work. MGJ is exhausted. I have been relying on manuscripts to survive. Readers, please bear with me. Chapter 146, Behind the Wedding. Although he didn't quite understand Clay's approach, Sir Malone decided to accept Clay's request in full. Earl Wyman had done similar things before, but he was not as radical as Clay. In fact, White Harbor has been expanding its fleet in the hands of Earl Wyman. When the previous Earl of Manderly was in office, White Harbor only had a few small sampans and 3 or 4 decaying ships. Old ship. Up to now, the White Harbor fleet, which already has more than 20 warships, is the result of Earl Wyman's efforts over the years. However, it is not obvious and does not show much fanfare. Sir Malone had a vague feeling that the head of the Manderly family and his heir might be planning something bigger. As an old guy who had served the family all his life, he naturally couldn't stand in the way. After explaining to Sir Malone, Clay basically ended the arrangements before leaving. Now all that is left is to attend a not-so-pleasant wedding tomorrow and deal with a few not-so-popular people. In the evening, Juventus visited Poseidon Tower again and delivered the arrangements for tomorrow's wedding. As a noble lord, Clay will serve as a witness for the common people. This standard is quite high and must be arranged in advance. In this matter, Juventus and his brotherly were deeply involved, but his new wife Mana had nothing to do with it. Clay understood Juventus's thoughts. In any case, he did not want Mana to know about it. This kind of thing is a matter of guest, and Clay naturally agrees. Besides, what's the use of telling this poor woman the matter? It will only increase troubles, although it is not Clay's own troubles. Early the next morning, Clay took his guards and headed straight for the godswood outside the wolf's lair. This godswood, far away from the city and rarely visited by people, became the only place for the newlyweds who believed in the old gods. The place where oaths are witnessed. Clay had already given an order to put the man Manderly under custody immediately after Juventus and his new wife left the residence. Clay did not want to have an accident at this last step. When they arrived at the scene, Juventus and the other family's relatives and friends, a total of more than 10 people, were already standing in the center of the sacred forest under the tree where Clay once talked to the three-eyed crow and gained Galisos' heart, waiting for their lord to arrive. For Mana, she still can't believe that she, a commoner from a small family, can actually invite the heir of the family, Clay Mandler, the great hero of the North, to be her officiant when she gets married. When she heard the news from her fiancé, she had always been in disbelief. She felt as if she was floating on the clouds. When she walked into the godswood, she felt very uneasy, fearing that Clay would not come at all. It wasn't until the neighing of the horses reached the ears of everyone at the scene and the majestic figure in gorgeous clothes appeared in everyone's sight that Mana felt relieved. To be honest, Clay has been in Westeros for a while, but he has never seen a wedding in its entirety. His memory as a child is too vague. Of the few wedding banquets, his main memory is the banquet. The food on. Therefore, he could not play too much role in the wedding and could only act according to the rules and traditions. Fortunately, this was a couple who believed in the old gods, and the wedding process was simpler than that of believers in the 7 gods in the south. Clay dismounted, and as the host of this wedding, Juventus immediately came forward and performed well. The expression on his face did not appear sad because of his brotherly's matter. However, maybe he is really happy just for the fact that he is getting married. Under normal circumstances, the marriage of common people now has nothing to do with nobles. But hundreds of years ago, when common people got married, the bride's first night belonged to the nobles. This is called Chiaquan. It was not until the reign of Yeharizai that the king followed the advice of his beloved wife, Queen Alicent, and abolished this terrible custom that was hated by countless nobles and applauded by countless commoners. Clay's arrival is a supreme honor for this couple. It will be regarded by others as blessings from the old and new gods, and is the best gift for a newlywed. Sir, thank you for coming. Juventus lowered his body and saluted Clay. Behind him, all the guests who came to attend saluted. Clay stood there and accepted the courtesy of these people calmly. Noble, he has long been used to all this. I will definitely do what I promised you. Clay smiled and glanced at Juventus. The latter was wearing blue embroidered clothes today, with gold rims sewn on the wrists. Obviously, this suit of clothes was not something that an ordinary guard of Juventus could afford daily. Although there is little in Westeros that goes against the rules, as long as you don't run around with a certain golden crown, no one can do anything to you. But civilians still rarely wear more luxurious clothes, which will cause them some unexpected troubles, because it means you have a few golden dragons in your pocket, and many people will stare at you. Today is a wedding. It is estimated that Juventus rented such a set of clothes from a tailor shop in White Harbor. Together with the white fur coat worn by his wife Mana, it could be regarded as a wedding dress. When Southerners get married, the woman may choose an ivory silk dress. Marguerite Tyrell wore such a dress when she got married, but Northerners will not do this because the northern climate does not allow them to do so. Under the heart tree, under the gaze of the three-eyed crow nailed to White Harbor, Clay made a brief opening speech. There was no meaningful actual content, but it made everyone present listen with interest. As the elder of the woman, Mana's father sent Mana to Juventus with a face full of bitterness and hatred. Mana put on a short dark brown cloak which in the tradition of Westeros is called girl's cloak. If she is a noble daughter with a family, then her maiden's cloak will be embroidered with the emblems representing the family, such as direwolves, roses, etc., But Mana is just a commoner's daughter, and her maiden's cloak, there's nothing on it. To put it bluntly, it's just a piece of dark brown cloth. If such a piece of cloth were draped on the shoulders of any noble daughter, she and her family would be ashamed of it. But this was not the case for Mana. She liked her cloak very much. Looking at the two people standing in front of him with excited expressions in their eyes, Clay sighed silently in his heart and continued his work as the host. He said, "Ms. Mana, are you willing to marry Mr. Ewing? There are no bells and whistles, the Northerners are simple and straightforward in everything they do." "Yes, I chose him." This was Mana's answer, the standard bride of the North answer. After hearing this, Clay's keen hearing told him that Juventus suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. He finally heard this sentence, and he could understand this reversal. "Please hold each other's hands tightly, and kneel at the foot of the heart tree in the presence of the gods." Juventus and Mana knelt down as instructed and held their hands together. Clay then took the next step. He said, "Bow your heads, you who are blessed by the gods, and show your humility to them. Pray and make your vows to each other to the gods." Listening to the two men chanting quietly, Clay moved his lips silently, and added the last words of the prayer in this wedding under the heart tree: "One body, one heart, one soul, now and forever." The wind blew, and the thousands of purple-red leaves of the heart tree rustled. No one spoke. The sacred forest seemed quiet and lonely. However, in Clay's eyes, when the two of them were praying, the surroundings of the heart tree seemed to be. Yoruo's magic ribbon suddenly became active. It seems that the newcomer's prayer has some special power, which makes this old god's power node, which was originally weak, get some kind of supplement. This is another very interesting thing. Clay stared thoughtfully at the scene in front of him. He couldn't understand what was happening in front of him. One thought after another passed through his mind, and he had thousands of thoughts. At this time, a small wisp of wind brought a low whisper to Clay's ears, and he said, "The oath of a pious person has extremely powerful power. Agent of ability God, I have never felt the taste of piety in you. You should be pious. This is a gift from the world." The murmur disappeared, or drifted away with the wind, but that didn't matter. Clay carefully understood what the three-eyed crow said to himself. From this sentence, he might be able to understand the truth behind this world. Get a glimpse of the tip of the iceberg. He knew that holding a wedding here would definitely attract the attention of the three-eyed crow. He was a witness, calmly watching everything that happened under the heart tree. The prayer ended and the vibration of the magic ribbon gradually subsided. Yawen took his wife's hand and stood up. Next, he took off the girl's cloak for his wife and put on the cloak he prepared for his wife. Although he is a bodyguard of the Manderly family, and once served Earl Wyman, he is still not qualified to use the Manderly family's cloak. On the continent of Westeros, the management of surnames is quite strict. Clay allowed him to use the cloak of the Manderly family guard. He was still a guard of the family, at least for now, so he was qualified to use this cloak. Clay would not argue with him about this. It was the last time anyway. It's not that he is ruthless. From any point of view, as a lord, Clay will never allow such a person to serve as the family's internal guard again, even if Juven himself was unaware of this from beginning to end. He didn't know because he was unaware. To a certain extent, it was stupidity, and stupidity, in this world, is also a fatal sin. Clay did not kill him directly and let the family information leak. His mere existence is his mercy. "Take your cloak for your wife, Mr. Ewing." Clay said these words. This was also the last part of the entire wedding under the heart tree. What happened after that had nothing to do with him as the host. After Clay presided over the wedding, he followed the cheerful crowd towards Juventus' home next to Fish King Square, and the next step was to visit Mr. A. After staying at Juventus' home for a while, Clay quietly left Juventus' home after dealing with several businessmen who heard about his arrival and wanted to get involved. Clay didn't ask Juventus to come over. There was no need for the brothers to meet each other and let the younger brother know that the older brother had betrayed him. Although from White Harbor's perspective, Juventus did the right thing, from the younger brother's perspective, this was still a betrayal. What betrays is the word family affection. Ely's home is not far from his brother's home, but it is in the deepest part of this alley. The surrounding environment is very poor. It's not that sewage flows across the street, but there is such a strong feeling of discomfort. It is a good hiding place. As a spy, there is not much oil and water in this area at first glance, and thieves rarely visit it, so it is a qualified choice. "Sir, you are here?" "He is inside. Brothers are watching and checked. There is no danger. This kid didn't expect us to come to him at all. He still doesn't know what happened." The leading guard at the door saw Clay arriving and enthusiastically came over to introduce him. Clay nodded. He did not object to someone coming to perform in front of him. This at least showed that this person was motivated and much better than those who lay flat. "Take your people and guard the door for me. Don't let anyone in." Also, keep your ears facing outward. You don't need me to remind you anymore, right? No, don't worry, sir. Your brothers won't hear anything. Very good. Clay glanced at the man and nodded. The latter immediately moved out of the way. Clay walked into the open door and entered Ellie's room. Sure enough, Juventus was right. Ellie's room was indeed quite messy. If Clay had some obsessive-compulsive disorder and mysophobia, he would probably hang Ellie to death. Frowning, he stepped over the rickety furniture and walked into the bedroom on his right. Although the climate in White Harbor is cold, and the smell is generally not easy to spread, Clay still smelled a strong smell of decay. It should be that there was no smell. Finished food. There was a person lying on the bed facing the door. Next to him stood a guard who was staring at him closely. When he saw Clay coming in, he immediately straightened his body and saluted Clay. Clay waved his hand, indicating that he had worked hard and could go out to rest. This man also followed Clay all the way south. He was deeply impressed by the commander's orders and prohibitions, so he walked out without any hesitation. Ellie, who had his eyes closed, heard the noise and opened his eyes to look at the person. At this sight, he stuttered, Sir. He never thought that the person who came to see him would actually be Clay himself. When these White Harbor guards came to see him, although he felt uneasy, he did not admit anything, and wanted to shout a few times to attract the attention of the White Harbor guards. Neighbors take note. But obviously, his popularity is not very good, and with the credibility of the White Harbor guard, even if someone hears his shouting, they will not pay attention to him. But now, seeing that the young master of the Manderly family actually came here in person, he suddenly felt something bad. Except for the things he had done, he had no qualifications to attract the attention of the eldest young master. He was not worthy. Clay didn't talk nonsense to him. He directly raised his left hand, and the magic power gathered in his palm. For such a person, he only wants results and has no time to listen to his lame excuses. There was a flash of green light, and the Axie rune was reflected in Ellie's pupils. Tell me, when did you start betraying your hometown? Today's update is late. The code is current. I am still in class. Wow, today is Saturday. I cried to death. Chapter 147. Cut the knot with a sharp knife, and the running wolf finally dies. If you want a person to betray, sometimes it is really simple. Just give him enough golden dragons, and tell him that these golden dragons can allow him to exchange for things that he can never exchange for in his original place. This is enough. Clay directly ignored Ellie's explanation of why he became an eye. Everyone has their own reasons. From their own perspective, they can say a sincere and last resort, but this cannot be forgiven. Reason? After Ellie was corrupted in the south, he started working on this job when he returned to the north. According to his account, he at least figured out the daily whereabouts of the important figures in the Poseidon Tower, the rotation of the guards, and some information on the combat readiness of the family army. And he handed all this information to the blonde bachelor who was always unpopular in the family, and Clay felt a chill in his back. As a demon hunter who is extremely vigilant and has an extremely long hearing range, Clay is not afraid of anyone coming to assassinate him. Even in his sleep, the danger is not great, but this does not mean that other members of the family can. Don't think that the war is just over with a winner on the battlefield. The bloody dagger hidden deep in the dark castle sometimes plays a more critical role. If Clay, as the eldest young master of White Harbor, had not been implanted into the deep-rooted system of the nobility from the beginning, he might have become a demon hunter in this era, even more outstanding than the faceless man of the House of Black and White. Assassin. Therefore, the leakage of the family's internal information made Clay more angry than the exposure of the family's military station, and also prompted him to murder the guy who was already under house arrest. In Clay's original plan, if such a peripheral spy did not cause much harm, considering that he had completely lost his ability to move, it didn't matter whether Clay killed him or not. But now, Clay has changed his mind. He no longer intends to keep such a person who has posed a huge threat to his family members. He has done what he has done, and he must pay the price. But Clay doesn't intend to take matters into his own hands. Every wrongdoer has his own fault. This matter started with Juventus and will end with him. After waiting until the wedding was over, Clay ordered to go down. Juventus was forced to let go of his newly married wife and quickly came to Clay. In fact, he had been feeling anxious in his heart. Faced with the unsuspecting Mana, he could only force a smile and suppress the anxiety in his heart. Sir, Ellie the panting Juventus looked at Clay uneasily, who had no expression on his face and just looked at him. After a long time, Clay said, You know, Juventus, what your brother did has done much more harm to the family than the family's weapons you found in the box, the port's cargo throughput, etc. Juventus's face suddenly turned pale. He had once served as Count Wyman's bodyguard. He knew the weight behind Clay's words, but he still didn't believe it. His lips wriggled and his voice was weak. Noiri just looks more fierce. I know him, he is very timid. It was his brother after all. At this time, he instinctively wanted to excuse his brother. It seemed that he was not the one who reported this matter to Clay at all. Your good brother, with the help of the key copied from your waist, sneaked into the Poseidon Tower many times. Through your mouth, he knew the time when the guards changed shifts. Oh, he has already figured out the importance of our Manderly family. The position of the member. What does he want to do? Accept the reality, Juventus. Just because of this, your brotherly will not be able to come out of White Harbor alive. I, Clay Manderly, cannot tolerate this kind of thing. You have to deal with your own brother. After that, you have two choices. First, leave White Harbor and go to the north. Lord Eddard Stark's Winterfell should welcome you and your family. Second, stay in White Harbor. The door of the family will always be closed for you. Forget everything about you in Poseidon Tower, and do other things. It will be good for everyone. Clay doesn't care how Juventus chooses. This kind of script where the younger brother cheats the older brother will happen once in a while on this continent. It's not that unusual. But no matter what, the Manderly family will not allow Juventus to serve as the family's bodyguard anymore. Clay will later give Sir Malone an order. If Juventus chooses to stay in White Harbor, then inform all the guards and never allow him to enter. Newcastle. This is responsible for the safety of family members. Regardless of whether Juventus is resentful towards Clay or not, Clay must nip it in the bud. Although, according to Clay's temper, it would be safest to kill Juventus directly as well. But no matter what, he can't do this kind of thing, because this is a disguised form of preventing people at the bottom from reporting the situation to him. The harm behind this is visible to the naked eye. After handling the matter with Juventus, Clay returned to the Poseidon Tower without stopping. Now it was time to deal with another more troublesome guy. Theomer Lannister sat quietly in the chair, playing with the chains of different materials around his neck, which represented the honors he had received in the city, when he was forced into the door by a group of thick and powerful guards and grabbed him directly. He had no resistance, because the guards with sharp eyes and quick hands had already pinched his hands. He even tried to take out the poison on the bedside. Neither can be done. He already understood that his behavior must have been exposed. To be honest, he had expected that such a day would come, but he did not expect that it would come so quickly. As a bachelor, he didn't think about what to do to the Manderly family at first. With a lot of enthusiasm, he came to the largest port in the north, ready to fulfill his duties as a bachelor. However, when the lord here, the annoying Earl Wyman, saw his appearance, his face became unhappy. After asking for his last name, he overturned the table of the welcome banquet. Theodore Lannister can still remember Lord Wyman's words at that time. I will not allow this good place in White Harbor to be contaminated by the stench of lions. So, Lannister, you'd better get out. You are not welcome in the north. But at that time, I just straight up said that the bachelors from the city were only loyal to the Lord. This sir obviously misunderstood me. Earl Wyman was also helpless. Killing him directly was too drastic, and it was not that bad. He couldn't return it. The Golden Lion didn't want to leave, so there was nothing he could do. Later, Theomer Lannister stayed in White Harbor. However, although he had his own raven cage and was able to manage some of White Harbor's official correspondence to the outside world, the medical responsibilities of the bachelor were completely ignored by him. Deprived. To exaggerate, even if Miss Vera's favorite dog was sick, Theomer Lannister said that he could save it. Lord Wyman would rather watch the dog die of illness, and Miss Vera cried into tears, "Don't allow yourself to help." He was never allowed to participate in anything involving the Manderly family. When he first arrived in White Harbor, there were always guards with stern eyebrows staring at him. They followed him every step of the way except when he went to the toilet. No way, this cannot be returned. Theomer Lannister himself also thought about leaving, but later, he found that he could no longer leave because he had been in White Harbor for some time and Earl Wyman would not let him go. He's gone. As a result, this awkward and frustrating life went on like this day by day. Earl Wyman never trusted him, and he never asked Earl Wyman to bring trouble to him. But the seeds of hatred were sown. After so many years, Earl Wyman's vigilance towards him slowly disappeared or slackened with the passage of time. Until a year ago, he got an opportunity by chance, contacted a big shot in King's Landing, and became the other's little bird in the north. He did not contact his family, the Lannister family, because he also hated the Lannister family. If it hadn't been for this damn surname and what the owner of this surname had done in the south, how could he have ended up like this in White Harbor? Situation. Without unreasonable hatred, nothing can be solely the responsibility of one party. But he has never had the experience of being a spy. How could a bachelor who is full of knowledge know these things? He does not know the specific identity of this adult, but as long as he can take revenge on the Manderly family, he is willing to do anything. However, the method was too naive, and the concealment of the offline was simply amateurish. In just 1 year, this young Master Clay Manderly was able to dig him out. Seeing Clay coming in, Seomer Lannister's already dull golden hair swayed slightly with the owner, and he said extremely calmly, "Master Clay, you are welcome to visit. Unfortunately, as a bachelor, I can't help you." "I'm sorry. There is no need to apologize, Meister Seomer. My time is precious and I don't want to hear your story. Everyone has their own reasons, but I only look at the results. I think when you make this decision, you've already expected this day." Seomer Lannister had nothing to refute to Clay's words. Speaking of which, Clay gave him a pretty good impression. If his surname was not Manderly, the result might not be like this. "Yes, Master Clay, you are right, it is indeed the case, but I didn't expect it to be so fast, and I didn't expect that I would fall into your hands. To be honest, I was awakened by nightmares countless times. They all died by your grandfather's sword, not yours. There is no difference. My grandfather and I both have the same surname, which represents a common will. It doesn't matter whose sword we die by, Bachelor Seomer." Theomer Lannister was silent. He didn't know what to say to Clay. He didn't beg for mercy. Lannister's pride did not allow him to surrender to the object of his hatred and beg for mercy. Clay didn't talk nonsense to him anymore. The green color of Axie's sigil flashed away, and Theomer Lannister's consciousness left in this world was frozen. After wiping the blood on his sword, Clay walked out of Seomer Lannister's room with a sullen face. Obviously, he did not get satisfactory information from this family's Meister. He didn't think that this was because the Yaxi seal had failed. A bachelor with a weak physique could not withstand the Yaxi seal. And he did not ask the scholar Seomer who his superior was. He just knew contact information. To put it simply, Seomer and the mysterious figure in King's Landing created something similar to a codebook in this world. The two parties hid the real information in it through seemingly normal correspondence. This couldn't have been done by a temporary organizer. Clay's suspects were suddenly reduced a lot. Although King's Landing is big, there are only 2 people who are really capable of doing this. Clay's old friend Earl Petter, Mr. Littlefinger, and the current head of intelligence in the kingdom, Lord Varys the 8-clawed spider, a powerful eunuch despite missing something from his crotch. As for Seomer himself, Clay gave him a good time. What's the point of torturing him when he wakes up? He's not some perverted sadist. White Harbor, under Clay's instruction, did not inform the Citadel of the news of his own death, because first, at this juncture, no one scent could gain the trust of the Manderly family. Second, the family has long adapted to the situation of shouldering this responsibility. Whether or not they have a bachelor is no longer that important. However, this incident exposed a problem. White Harbor may have been under the surveillance of some behind-the-scenes figures for a long time, which made Clay feel very bad. There is a saying that goes well, if you are not afraid of thieves, you are afraid of being missed. People want to know about you all the time. It is strange that you can feel safe. Littlefinger had already done something to him once in Winterfell, but Clay later reviewed it and tended to think that it was a provocation against Stark and Lannister, and he was just used as a pawn. But this time, the target is pointed at White Harbor where he is, which is completely different from before. For this, Clay has no good solution for the time being. If it is a quick war and a decisive battle, such as the 2 wars he fought south, then the role of intelligence will be relatively weakened. But if it is a long-term war, then the advantage of intelligence will definitely come out. Moreover, if Clay wants to build a large navy and control the sea, it is also very important to know which part of the local territory is empty. Before leaving, Clay returned to the Wolf's Lair and specifically explained the internal spy defense. In the past, most of the White Sea Guard's energy was focused on external affairs. Now, Clay ordered them to stabilize their internal affairs first. The army, the demon hunters, the White Sea Guards, Clay had arranged everything he could, and the rest could only be dealt with when he returned. After thoroughly explaining everything, Clay got on the boat to Changji Island one evening, where his dragon was waiting for him. What he didn't know was that just as he was leaving White Harbor, all the Stark family members in the main castle of Winterfell had never thought that Eddard Stark, who had been recovering well, would become a hero in just 2 years. Danny weakened rapidly, and after struggling hard, the life force completely left his body. Countless ravens were released from Winterfell, and their target was the home castle of all vassals. Chapter 148 The Giant Blue Gold Shadow. Clay didn't know about the great changes in the north due to some strange combination of circumstances. When he left this time, he didn't leave any communication method like last time. He didn't even know where to find deaneries, so how could he stay? Where is the communication place? It took 2 days for Clay to approach the deserted Changji Island in the dim sunset. Under the strict order of the old man, the Manderly family had implemented the blockade of Changji Island very thoroughly. If it hadn't been for Clay himself, it would have been impossible for the ship to cross the blockade and reach the shore of Long Sister Island. After getting off the ship immediately left according to Clay's order. At least until Clay came back, it was not appropriate for others to know the existence of Galisos, as this would cause unnecessary trouble. Clay walked around the shore and found no trace of Galisos, but this is normal. At this time, the dragon should not go out to hunt. The small cave must not be able to accommodate the current dragon. Clay don't know where it is. Walking deeper into the island, Clay's demon hunter senses allowed him to see many suspicious traces on the ground. Among other things, the huge claw marks. If there were no strange species on the island, then it can only be left behind by Galisos. Clay squatted down and pushed aside the overturned turf. The claw marks left on the ground were quite large, almost as big as half of Clay's body. If you extrapolate from this, Galisos' current size is probably not small. After wandering for a long time, Clay could not find the shadow of the giant dragon. Creatures such as dragons cannot be found by following the traces. If you look for it and just flutter its wings and take off, the traces will become useless. Clay had no choice but to find a sheltered place, lit a bonfire, made a simple grill, and grilled the food he brought. Night had arrived, and the sun rose over the narrow sea and set in the direction of Westeros, at least from Clay's current location. But Clay didn't wait long. When the last ray of the sun set in the west, the majestic sound of flapping wings sounded from behind Clay. Obviously, something big was coming from there. Turning around suddenly, he saw an extremely huge dark blue shadow passing over Clay's head in the sky. The figure of the dragon appeared in Clay's eyes again after more than 2 months. Clay really didn't expect Galisos to grow so big. The old man's description to him last time was obviously conservative. This guy has grown from the size of a big cat to a wingspan of more than 10 meters now. Of behemoth. That is to say, there is magic in this world of ice and fire. Otherwise, in another world, the cell division speed that is so outrageous without any basic laws would have been arrested and studied long ago. Galisos obviously also discovered the bonfire on the ground. The giant dragon that has ruled this place for so long has seen humans for the first time in such an inland place. He just wanted to see which one is too long-lived. The guy came here, and then he sensed the presence of his owner. Creatures like dragons have a very strong sense of dependence and trust on the people who raise them, especially people like Clay who have had magical communication with them. Although it was only a little bit old when Clay sent it here, it still understood its owner's intention and hunted on the island by itself, grilling fish in the biting bay. Its diet ranges from snakes, small lizards, to sheep, and all kinds of large land creatures. Up to its current position, it sees a water column with a whale breathing on the sea surface. If it dives down, the scorching dragon flames will roast the entire back of the unlucky whale. Relying on its sharp teeth and claws, if Galisos is closer to the shore, it will use its wings to drag the captured whale to the shore, and then slowly enjoy it. If you stay far away, anyway, even if the whale dies, its body will not sink into the sea immediately. It will circle back and forth, spitting out dragon flames to roast a little bit at a time, and finish off its food one bite at a time. Although the other hunters in the sea were tightened by the smell of blood, none of them dared to come up and compete with Galisos for food. Even if they did, they would be turned into snacks after the meal in the next mouthful of dragon flames. Just kidding, in front of the ultimate predator, they only deserve to eat some leftovers. Although they were treated better this time, they encountered fully cooked food, which was a change of taste for them. Seeing Clay again, Galisos hissed, his dragon wings vibrated, and his strong body drew a circle in the sky. He turned around and landed in front of Clay's bonfire. Dazzled by the wind and sand stirred up by the dragon wings, Clay stretched out his hand to block his eyes. Losing his vision, he only felt a loud thump on the ground in front of him. At the same time, a thought rang in his heart, which probably meant, "Master, come and see." When the wind and sand dispersed, Clay just put down his arm, and the huge dragon head was placed directly in front of his eyes. I have to say that Galisos' appearance is really good. The dark blue scales have completely grown, extending from the tip of the nose to the back, and a golden texture still retains its charm even in the night. Clay felt obvious heat, part of which came from the high temperature in Galisos' mouth, and the other part came from the extremely high body temperature of the dragon itself. According to records, in winter, especially in cold nights, the heat from the dragon's body makes it look like its whole body is smoking, which is a strange sight. Looking at the majestic creature in front of him, Clay felt proud. Can you see it clearly? Such a big dragon, so beautiful, mine. The dragon's nose sniffed hard at the pancakes Clay placed on the grill. The twitching air caused the campfire to sway in all directions. Clay once again thought about what Galisos meant, but that meaning was not so friendly. Is this food edible? I don't smell anything delicious regarding this. Clay could only roll his eyes. Although both dragons and humans eat cooked food, it is obvious that the dragon has narrowed its path when it comes to eating. It just has extraordinary pleasure in cooked meat. As for others are ignored. Okay, you eat yours, I'll eat mine, and neither of us cares about the other. Clay pushed away Galisos' big head. If he didn't speak, Galisos' thoughts were already focused on sharing with him which part of the whale was delicious. One person and one dragon were communicating like this. Galisos' huge body nestled down next to Clay, his slender neck resting on the ground, and the dragon's head resting in front of Clay's eyes. Clay leaned against Galisos' body and looked at the twinkling stars in the cloudless sky. He knew that tomorrow was the day for his departure. Galisos and himself were about to start another journey on the Essos continent. Journey. He felt the temperature of the dragon's body. Perhaps it was due to the infusion of his own magic power. His dragon grew too fast. In his memory, Daenerys' dragon was probably slightly bigger now, but it was completely different from Galisos. C's size is incomparable. That's okay, dragons are a proud race, and only stronger forces can tame them. If Clay only brought a dragon that was slightly larger than a war horse and could barely be ridden, it might not have much of a deterrent effect. Clay doesn't know exactly where Daenerys is now. Because the current situation in Westeros has turned upside down due to his intervention, he can no longer tell when something happened in Essos. This is the only window period for him to go to Essos. Now, the attention of all Westeros is attracted by the offensive and defensive battle under King's Landing. Living in White Harbor, he has the opportunity to leave Westeros for a while, and then after that, there will be no such opportunity. The palm of his hand caressed Galisos' long neck, which was intertwined with golden textures. The part where the bone and membrane were connected gradually sank with Clay's caress, which meant that the dragon was now in an extremely relaxed state. It was probably because he had too much dinner. Although Galisos was very excited to see Clay and rubbed his big head against Clay's body for a while, he was still a little sleepy now. The dragon opened its mouth, first burped and then yawned very obviously, a unique dragon yawn. Galisos shrank his body and covered himself and Clay with huge dragon wings. It's ready to sleep. What a lazy guy. It's a pity that I still lack the complete dragon training skills of the Valyrian Empire. Look at what you look like now. Sleep after eating. Clay touched the long dragon horns of Galisos, which are the two sharpest bones on the dragon's skull. The rest will have some small bone spurs of different lengths, depending on the dragon species. The current Galisos, in fact, has far greater symbolic significance on the battlefield than its military significance. During Aegon's conquest, the reason why the three dragons were invincible was because they were all adult dragons, and their bodies were as big as those of young dragons. Don't. It is said that Aegon's mount, Balerion, the Black Death famous in the Seven Kingdoms, lived until the reign of Arbiter Yeherizai before finally being unable to withstand the limit of his lifespan and dying in the dragon's lair in King's Landing. It lived for more than 200 years in total. Dragons, magical creatures that go against common sense, will continue to grow until the moment of death, as long as they have enough food and open space for growth. It can be said that when the Valyrian Empire still existed, there would definitely be a dragon bigger than Balerion, the Black Death, in this world, not just one, but probably a group of them. Perhaps, in the eyes of the Valyrian dragon kings who mastered the core dragon training skills, Balerion's size was just basic operation, and everything else might be considered stunted. Speaking of the Valyrian Empire, this is another thing that puzzles Clay, because the collapse of this huge empire is really something that goes against common sense. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's just talk about the survivors. Now everyone knows that of the more than 50 Dragon King families, only one Targaryen is left, and strictly speaking, they are not survivors, because in the Valyrian Empire before the collapse, their family had moved away. It is said that the Valyrian Free Fortress was built on 14 fire peaks. When the end came, all the fire peaks erupted together. The once magnificent and great Free Fortress was reduced to dust, and the huge empire became history in an instant. It's all passed down like this, as if this is the truth of history, but you can't stand to think about it carefully, because when you think about it, you will find that it cannot be explained in many places. First of all, let's not talk about how the leader of the Targaryen family at the time foresaw this catastrophe. Let's talk about the other more than 50 unlucky Dragon King families. These are dragons, not ones running on the ground. They are dragons that can fly with their wings, can reach heaven. The volcanoes erupted at the same time. Yes, the scale may be a little bigger and the continent was shattered, but this kind of thing can be done overnight. It really makes the whole floor look like paper. Even if the disaster happened and all the dragons were sleeping in their nests, they wouldn't have any time to react, right? As long as they can fly into the sky, they can run away, right? Clay didn't believe that the Dragon Kings of Valyria would do anything to coexist with the Empire. Look at how smooth the Targaryen family escaped. Also, the Valyrian Free Fortress conquered so many places at that time, and the borders were far away from the capital. In this case, wouldn't there be dragons and dragon knights stationed abroad? The current situation is that the volcano under the Valyrian Free Fortress erupted, and then, overnight, all the dragons and dragon knights, along with most of the civilians, disappeared. But judging from the degree of destruction, Clay felt that this was probably a direct hit from a thing named Big Ivan produced by Pinnacle Mousy in his past life memory, right? No matter how you look at it, this cannot be explained by ordinary natural and man-made disasters. It is extremely unbelievable to die to this extent. Clay believes that he needs to take a look at the ruins of the Valyrian Free Fortress. There are too many mysteries in it. He never believes that a volcanic eruption can turn a huge empire into this. Nowadays, almost all records about the history of Valyria are gone on the market. There are only the corners of the city, and there may be some remnants in several large city-states in Essos. These word-of-mouth claims are no longer credible. In Clay's opinion, it was the gods themselves who did it. This is probably the most ridiculous explanation, but it is also the most reliable. I wonder what I'll encounter in Essos again. What do you think, Galisos? Clay patted Galisos on the head, but the only answer he received was the dragon's even breathing and relaxed snores. Obviously, this dragon, which slept after eating, had completely fallen asleep. Clay smiled. It seems that all the answers can only be found on the continent on the east coast of the Narrow Sea, whether it is his final meeting with Daenerys, the last Targaryen, or annihilation. The truth in history is waiting for Clay Mandler. Go to sleep. You will definitely have a good dream tonight. I heard that people with the blood of the Dragon King will dream about giant dragons. This is called Dragon Dream. I wonder if I will dream about it tonight? Clay thought. His eyes gradually became heavier and heavier as he looked at the sea of twinkling stars in the sky. I don't know when, he also fell asleep. Chapter 149 400 words, a summary. Aha, it's time to summarize again. This time I still follow the old rules. First talk about the bad points, then summarize the plot, and finally talk about the plan. First of all, this is my first time writing a novel. Around the 90th chapter, I put part of the author's words into the main text. Of course, this behavior was quickly caught by readers. After a beating, the author, for the sake of his life, will never do such a thing again. This is an operational matter. As for the plot, Crane goes south to fight this battle. To be honest, I originally planned two versions. One is the current version, and the other is to completely muddy the water and go south to pull up. Renly besieges Tywin, but will completely break with Stannis. The reason why I used this version is because I found that if Clay did that, he would be completely trapped in the southern battlefield and completely lose the possibility of returning to White Harbor and taking Galisos away. So, in the end, I chose this short war to give Clay a chance to sneak away to see Daenerys while both sides were resting. This plot of more than 100,000 words is actually very simple to sum up. Clay bulldozed the Frey family and swallowed up half of the land of the twins. Then he captured Jaime Lannister in 2 battles at Riverrun and finally fought with the Old Man. The Lion negotiated and exchanged for the unlucky Eddard Stark. Now it seems that the North does have a great advantage. However, as Clay leaves Westeros and Ed Stark dies under the plot of the Old Lion, war will come to the North again. When Clay comes back, he doesn't know what he will see. In short, the next chapter is a new volume. The kings of Westeros are busy with their own wars and autumn has quietly arrived. The enemies outside the Great Wall in the north may be stronger than in another time and space. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you all for your support. The author will continue to work hard, then, please read the second volume, Late Autumn Volume. Chapter 150 The giant dragon flutters its wings over the straits and see many years later, Mr. Rune Leslie, who had become a senior captain, proudly boasted to his friends countless times that the largest dragon in the empire, the sea god Galisos, must have been discovered by himself first. However, although no one believed what he said, because such boasts were too common in the empire under the rule of Emperor Clay Manderly, no one knew that he was actually right. When Clay was woken up by Galisos' scorching body, it was already after 9 o'clock the next morning. There was nothing he could do about it. In fact, the dragon, like its owner, was a lazy sleeper in the standard sense. If you have the opportunity to sleep in, no one can stop you. After cleaning himself a little, Clay came to Galisos. The huge blue-gold creature looked at his master stupidly. He was probably not too sleepy and his eyes were full of confusion. Galisos, get down. I'll take you to an interesting place. Are you tired of staying on this broken island? Clay waved down at Galisos, gesturing to the dragon's lower body. Galisos was not too big now, but if Clay wanted to ride it, it would no longer be as easy as mounting a horse. Galisos was stunned for a few seconds, obviously not quite understanding what his master meant. Don't ask Clay how he knew, the rather recognizable expression on the dragon's face explained everything. There's no way, it's not their instinct to be ridden across the sky. This has to be taught the day after tomorrow. Unfortunately, Clay's high Valyrian is obviously not up to par, and he didn't say anything other than dragon flame. Nor will it. So, for the next half hour, Clay tried his best to make Galisos understand what he meant. Finally, the big blue-gold guy folded his wings and leaned down on the ground. Don't think that this is because of its docile temperament. Dragons are only docile when facing their masters. Only when facing their prey or enemies will they show their demeanor as the kings at the top of the food chain. Stepping on the dragon's left wing, Clay used his strength to lift himself up and sit firmly on Galisos' back. The dragon's back was very warm and the scales were smooth, but the bulge in the north provided good protection. Grip place. After adjusting his posture, Clay patted Galisos on the back and said softly, "Fly, Galisos." After all, it is a giant dragon that belongs to the sky. After hearing the master's command, it straightened up instantly, its strong legs suddenly exerted force, and it started to run forward with its body. At the same time, the huge wings began to flap, and the membrane wings flapped up and down, creating a huge wind and providing the dragon with strong lift. At first, Galisos was not used to the sudden extra person on his back, but soon, it got used to it. So, Clay finally drove his dragon, left the ground and came to the air. The sound of howling wind filled my ears, the dragon was moving very fast, and the roar of the dragon's mouth was full of excitement. It was finally able to leave this place. The previous owner refused to let it leave, and the instinct derived from magic allowed it to carry out this order. However, the dragon longed for freedom after all, and it wanted to see a wider world. Galisos, let's fly higher. The dragon knight who stepped on the dragon's back was connected with his dragon's mind. Now, there was no need for Credo to say anything, Galisos had already understood what he meant. The dark blue scales look round and fine under the sun, and the golden stripes dotted on them show a brilliant color under the sun. With his wings fluttering and the dragon's head pointing upward, Galisos and Clay quickly rose up and rushed toward the clouds in the sky. In fact, Clay did this because he was afraid of flying too low and letting his fleet on the blockade mission of Biting Bay discover the existence of Galisos. Again, the dragon will definitely be known to the 7 countries, but it will definitely not now. Getting on the fastest means of transportation in this era, Clay flew out of the Bite Bay and entered the Blue Narrow Sea in less than half a day. The first stop he planned was Pantos on the other side of the Narrow Sea. There would be some interesting people waiting for him there, such as Octopus Spider's good friend, Illyrio, the governor of Pantos. The Lord Governor, who had been supporting the false Aegon Targaryen to take the throne, didn't know what he would think when he saw an adult male dragon master landing in front of him. Deanery's current location is either in Slaver's Bay or on the way to Slaver's Bay, which would be the case if Essos was not affected by the war. Clay feels that the war situation in the 7 kingdoms should not affect Deanery's trajectory on the Essos continent for the time being. He came this time not only to talk to Deanery's about counterattacking Westeros in the future, but also to build his own power in Essos. To be honest, the Unsullied are a very good choice. In addition to being good infantry on the battlefield, these guys are excellent at guarding the palace. Slaver's Bay, which is rich and unsullied, will become his unsullied production line, providing him with a strong backup force. If these slave merchants understand the situation, Clay will purchase the unsullied at the cost price. If they don't understand, then let them experience what the dragon's anger is. After flying out of Biting Bay, Clay ordered Galisos to descend. After all, flying high in the sky for a long time is not a very comfortable thing. The dragon's back relies on its own arms and legs to stabilize itself. The body is too fast, and there is no joy like flying dragons in the sea. However, the speed and height have decreased, which means that the situation of self-exposure has greatly increased, but it doesn't matter. Now it is outside the traditional range of Westeros. If it is discovered, I can't be contacted. Clay Mandler on the head. Flying, the energetic Galisos began to search for today's breakfast on the sea. It was too difficult to kill large whales. If the owner accidentally fell, it would be troublesome. Therefore, this giant dragon, which is as greedy as its owner, can only settle for food that is relatively small and easy to catch. Clay also knew what this foodie was going to do. He was quite helpless and could only follow Galisos to descend in altitude and fly close to the sea. The dragon slowed down and he had time to release his hand and take out the water bag. He drank a lot of it for himself. The dragon's slender neck suddenly plunged into the water like some kind of seabird. When it was lifted up again, it already had a big long-tailed fish in its mouth that was struggling wildly. The water from the fish's tail hit the dragon's back directly. On Clay's face, he slapped Galisos in annoyance. After a small supply of supplies and a little recovery, Galisos was ready to continue moving in the direction given by its master. However, not long after it flew out, it told itself about a small black dot that appeared in its sight. Owner. As the distance continued to get closer, Clay finally saw clearly what it was. If he saw it correctly, it should be a Bravo-style merchant ship. When Clay was traveling in Essos, he had been on this large merchant ship with a large displacement many times, so he was able to determine the identity of the other party at a glance. Clay didn't care, but the same could not be said for the sailors and captain on the ship. Everyone on the deck was in a state of complete confusion from top to bottom. They couldn't believe their eyes and suspected that they hadn't slept well last night. Now hallucinating. Room Leslie, who was just a first mate, opened his mouth wide and stared intently at the behemoth flying towards him on the sea. In terms of size, Galisos was still a little inferior to this huge Bravos merchant ship, but it still gave these sailors enough shock. Bless me, Lord Neptune, what is that? Lu En heard his captain murmuring to himself. In fact, everyone on the ship had the answer. No matter how absurd the answer was, anyone who saw the soaring figure knew about this legendary creature. Identity of a dragon, Captain, that's a dragon, no doubt about it. Rune replied firmly. Although he still can't believe his eyes, everyone knows that the dragon has disappeared from this world for more than 100 years, and now their group has just returned from Westeros. A merchant ship actually saw a giant dragon on the sea? Captain, do we need to make any preparations? We have never experienced dealing with dragons. Knowing that his captain was still sleepwalking, Lu En, who was the first to come back to his senses, loudly asked his captain. The man whose face was eroded red by the sea breeze after he came back to his senses, hesitated for only a second and shook his head. He shook his head. Don't talk nonsense, Rune. We don't even have a ballista on the ship. How do we expect to pose a threat to the dragon? He looked at the huge figure approaching him quickly with a complicated expression and said with a wry smile, Now, we can only kneel down and pray devoutly that this giant dragon that comes from nowhere will not pour its dragon flames on our heads. It's not that the captain is timid. If a pirate ship comes to rob them, the captain is not timid at all. For this voyage, he specially hired a group of guards who are proficient in swordsmanship. If he really wants to join forces with the pirates, then let's see whose sword is sharper. But for an enemy like the giant dragon that clearly exceeds the upper limit of the current version, apart from raising the white flag directly, the dragon may not be interested in him at all. Just look around and leave, and he can still be lucky enough to survive. Dare to shout, a puff of dragon flame came down, and now in this wooden boat, on this vast sea, everyone on the whole boat is counted. Even if it is not directly burned to dregs by the dragon flame, it will eventually fall into the sea to feed the fish. Clay didn't know the specific location of Pantos, but he only knew a general direction. He had no ability to create a global positioning system in this world, so he could only rely on the general direction. Coincidentally, he met a free guide on the road, and Clay decided to go up and ask. Anyway, he had prepared countless vests, and no one could contact the eldest son of the Manderly family in White Harbor. All in all, a solid batch. However, when Galisos switched from fighter mode to helicopter hovering mode, Clay glanced at the situation on the ship, and it seemed that something was not quite right. What's going on with these two, kneeling on the ground with their heads in their hands? Are they performing some strange sea ceremony? Clay knew that sailors had some strange customs on the ship. As the eldest son of White Harbor, he had heard about it for a long time, and had experienced it personally during his travels in Essos. However, with such a outrageous posture, he still would a first encounter. Clay waited on the dragon's back. The whistling wind caused by the dragon's flapping wings made the crew below tremble. In the descriptions of the Bravos people, dragons are generally not a positive image. Finally, Clay realized that this was probably not a sea ceremony, but that the crew were frightened by his Galisos. He helplessly shouted below, Friends and Bravos below, please raise your head and rest assured, there is nothing dangerous. Suddenly hearing these words, Lu En's first reaction was to reply viciously in his heart, Who are you? I raised my head as soon as I was told. The dragon wings are all smeared on my face. If I'm not careful, everyone will be dead. Before he finished vomiting, Lu En's face towards the deck suddenly froze, and then, with incredible light speed, he raised his head and looked at the source of the young voice in great shock. Also reacting to him were the captain, and a few brave sailors who were not scared to wet their pants. It turned out that they all thought it was an ownerless wild dragon. After all, everyone knew that the Targaryen, the last Dragon King family, had already. It has been more than 10 years since its destruction, and there should no longer be people in this world who can control dragons. And now, there is someone on the dragon's back. How is this possible? You can understand what this means with your buttocks. The 9 free trade city-states on the eastern seaboard of the Narrow Sea have been under the rule of dragons for thousands of years. They finally survived the collapse of the Valyrian Empire. but the surviving Targaryens still used dragons to suppress them until they could not lift their heads. Now, the dragon and the dragon knight on its back mean that the Dragon King family still exists, which is a big deal. Rune struggled to look at Clay's face on the dragon's back. He didn't recognize this person, and he didn't see the silver hair and purple eyes of the symbol, but this did not affect Rune's awe of Clay at all. The Knight of the Dragon, this it is what every man in the world wants to do in his dreams. Seeing that someone finally looked up, Clay breathed a sigh of relief. It was okay. The few brave ones left finally had something to talk about. He ordered Galisos to lower himself a little further and place his souls on the hardest side of the ship, allowing the dragon to rest and at the same time make it easier for him to ask questions. There was an unpleasant creaking sound of wooden planks, and the whole dragon of solidite Galisos was pressed against the side of the huge merchant ship. Fortunately, the bottom of the ship was filled with goods shipped from Westeros, otherwise the ship would have been destroyed by this move. Gotta turn it over. After searching for a long time, Clay looked at a bearded man who was relatively calm, pointed at him, and asked directly, "This friend of Bravo's, I think you will be more than happy to tell me where Pentos is, right?" Luwin trembled all over after being called out. After hearing Clay's words, he nodded crazily. The speed of his nodding amazed everyone around him. Luwin Leslie said in his heart, "This mysterious dragon knight is going to Pentos. Hey, I wonder if their governor will lose control when he sees the dragon." Anyway, for him, a veteran who has been floating on the water for so many years and is used to seeing strong winds and waves, all he can do now in front of the dragon's power is to fight against his bladder. As for the rest, he has already I can't control it anymore. It's a new chapter. I've been under a lot of pressure from study and work recently, so try hard. Chapter 151 Governor Illyrio's mentality exploded in every dream. Governor Illyrio Mapates would dream that his wife Silas was still alive, and he stood beside her, looking at their son Little Griffin, sitting on the Iron Throne. Rule the 7 kingdoms. In fact, he works hard for this goal every day, so by now, the child has already confirmed that he is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and the first heir to the Iron Throne. If he ascends the throne, then he is Aegon VI Targaryen, the great king with the same name as his ancestor. However, he will always wake up from his dream and come to the balcony to quietly look at the silent Panto before dawn. At the port, Illyrio sighed silently. There is no way, the current situation is really not too good. His best friend Varys is staying in King's Landing, but he can no longer control the situation. Ever since Eddard Stark escaped from King's Landing, things have slipped into an increasingly uncontrollable whirlpool. In the original plan, Eddard Stark would die in King's Landing, and the Stark family would fight with the Lannister family. The family will fight until death. Although Eddard Stark's escape still triggered a war between the two families, this sense of loss of control made him and Varys choke. Varys, the 8-clawed spider entrenched in King's Landing, also spent part of his energy to guard against Littlefair. The attack was already in a hurry. Afterwards, it was originally thought that the Stark family would suffer defeat in this asymmetrical war, but 2 powerful generals emerged among these northerners. In addition to Stark's young master, the mysterious the young master of White Harbor made Varys and him even more frightened. What a cruel method. Through one battle, more than 10,000 elite Lannister troops were wiped out, and the Northern Territory, which was originally at a disadvantage, became invincible. If Eddard Stark had not been accidentally captured, this war would have ended with a complete victory in the north, which was not exactly what Varys and Illyrio wanted to see. In their plan, every one of the 7 kingdoms should be exhausted in the endless war. In the end, the Little Griffin supported by them, under the name of Aegon Targaryen, complete the conquest of weakened Westeros. But now, with the rapid victory in the north, their strength has not been weakened, but has been strengthened. The Iron Islands have also formed a semi-ally with them, and they have firmly controlled the Riverlands. Their combined strength is the strongest side. Moreover, this is a very difficult alliance to divide, because this is not an alliance of 3 companies, but a military community with the North as its absolute core. Therefore, if there is no problem in the North, there will be no big problem in this alliance. But precisely, the extreme xenophobia in the North and the long distance are beyond the reach of Varys in King's Landing. And now, Varys himself is surrounded by Stannis and Renly's army in King's Landing. His own safety is not guaranteed, let alone stumbling upon the Northerners. It seems that we have to find a way to send someone to contact the people in the North. If they have no intention of getting involved in the Iron Throne, there is no fundamental conflict between the 2 sides. Maybe we can talk. If we can get their support, little Aegon will win this war. Deal? Illyrio made several candidates for contact in his mind. The first was Clay Manderly, the young master of White Harbor. White Harbor is considered the most open family in the North, and this powerful figure in the North is also younger. Without the hatred of the North against the Targaryens in the Usurpers' War, When the King's Landing incident is over, we have to contact him immediately. We don't know what kind of person he is and what hobbies we can exploit. There is really too little information about him. Just as he was thinking about it, Illyrio's cloudy eyes spotted a small black spot on the Sea of Pentos. His first reaction was that his eyes were cloudy again. He had contracted this problem a long time ago. There were always small black spots moving in front of his eyes, especially when the sunlight was strong. Squeezing his eyes hard and rubbing his face roughly with his big fat hands, Illyrio opened his eyes again, hoping that the annoying little black spots would disappear. But when his eyes focused again, the hand he hadn't put down stopped in midair. The face of this pampered and powerful governor in Pentos turned visibly pale, as if he had seen something extremely unbelievable, because he had already recognized the outline that appeared in his sight. It was a dragon, a living dragon, definitely not the three little ones that girl Daenerys Targaryen had made. It was a giant blue dragon that he had never seen before. Within a few breaths, the sound of the dragon's wings echoed through the sky above Pentos City. It was early in the morning, and not many people were active on the streets, but anyone who was awake or just dumbfounded, he froze on the spot, or let out a piercing scream, dropped what he was holding and ran away. Even if he didn't know what the big thing flying over his head was, he still had the most instinctive instinct of danger. As a result, the city of Pentos, where the sun had just revealed its morning glory, was in chaos. Clay on Galisos' back was also very depressed. He didn't expect that he would come to Pentos at this time. He couldn't help it. This was his first time here and the time was not stuck, so he wanted to pull him. None of Fang's appearances were successful. Forget it, let's just do it. Now we have to find a place to land. The land utilization rate of Pentos, a port city, is extremely high. There are buildings everywhere and the alleys and roads are extremely narrow, which is not suitable for the dragon to land at all. With no choice, Clay could only give up his plan to land at the port. At this time, Galisos roared and conveyed to Clay a landing location that he liked. It was a gorgeous courtyard, covering a huge area. It was on the hill behind the port and was surrounded by layers of brick walls. It looked like it should be the residence of some important person. It's okay, Clay is not here to be a liberator for the lower class people of Pentos anyway. In fact, the living standards of the free people of Pentos are much higher than those of ordinary Westeros farmers. With that time available, Clay might as well consider leading his people to build a fortune and become rich. Under the stunned expression of Governor Illyrio, Clay drove Galisos and landed firmly in the courtyard of his home. He was so frightened that the beautiful lies made in the courtyard dropped the sumptuous breakfast prepared for the governor and tried her best to flee. Like the first mate on the ship, Governor Illyrio also thought it was a wild dragon at first and felt that he must control it no matter what, and tried to let young Aegon ride on it. In this case, no one would question it again. Aegon Targaryen's identity. But now, when he saw the young brown-haired male figure on the dragon's back, his brain was already in a state of complete shutdown. Even with his cultivation, he was completely stupid at this time. How can it be? How can it be? How can it be? Why is there an adult male dragon master still existing in this world? He is definitely not the dead Viserys. Who is he? In an instant, the Lord Governor, who was bent on seeking the restoration of Aegon Targaryen and becoming the uncrowned king of the Seven Kingdoms, was covered in cold sweat. An adult male dragon master, this is iron stronger than anyone else. Throne claimed. His cloudy eyes were bloodshot, and he tried desperately to see Clay's appearance clearly. Unfortunately, the sun had not fully risen yet, so he couldn't do it. So, the anxious governor, regardless of whether he was feeding the dragon, possibly, his plump body took 3 steps and 2 steps at a time, rushed out of the bedroom and came to the feet of Galisos. Clay was worried about who to communicate with to express his intention when he saw a door opened in the darkness and a fat man ran out. He couldn't stop until he was forced back by Galisos' half-open dragon's mouth. Stop. Governor Illyrio felt the burning heat of the dragon. Only then did he realize the dangerous situation he was in. Except for Daenerys and the mysterious dragon knight in front of him, it is estimated that no one in the world has experience in dealing with dragons. He looked at Clay's young face that seemed to be smiling, but not smiling at all, and the evil and ferocious eyes of this blue-gold dragon, and he suddenly felt like he was dead. He immediately raised his hands and shouted loudly, "Friends on the dragon's back, I am Illyrio, the governor here. I have no ill intentions. Please rest assured." Hearing these words, Clay was stunned. Hey, he found the right person directly, which saved himself the trouble. However, Clay did not intend to directly ask him where Daenerys was now. I know what the governor has planned. He came to control the dragon, and then asked where Daenerys Targaryen was, and any fool could hear what the plan was. Wasn't this Lord Governor eager for little Aegon to marry his nominal aunt? and then go back together to conquer Westeros? Now, kill yourself, have a dragon or a dragon much bigger than Daenerys' little dragon. Isn't it easy to find the identity? Even if they don't seek relatives from Targaryen, they go directly to Daenerys to marry and completely complete the monopoly on dragons. In that case, there will probably be no stronger claimant than Clay in the world. Illyrio knew very well that his precious son, little Aegon, would not be accepted by the dragon. The Dragon King's blood was so thin in his body that the dragon would not be able to accept such a Valyrian. As you wish, Mr. Governor, I hope that my hasty visit will not cause you too much trouble. If it does, I deeply apologize in my family and I will compensate for it. Clay specifically said something about my family. Sure enough, Illyrio's eyes suddenly looked wrong. What? You have another family? Which family? Since when has there been a dragon family besides Targaryens in this world? If not, then, is this a Targaryen? Exclamation. When I thought of this, Illyrio's eyes turned a little dark. Although the Dragon Knight whose name was not yet known had the wrong hair color, the fact that he could control the dragon already explained everything. People with silver hair and purple eyes may not necessarily be descendants of the Dragon King family, but people who can control giant dragons must be from the Dragon King family. No one can deny this. Galisos, be kind to our Lord Governor. Clay patted Galisos on the back, and the dragon reluctantly moved the food to his mouth. In his opinion, the guy in front of him was rich and fat, and it would definitely be a good dish after roasting. Be careful. Hearing the name Galisos, Illyrio, who was familiar with the history of the Valyrian Empire, immediately thought of the name that represented the god of the sun, moon, and stars, and he suddenly became more convinced. This is a name of the same level as Balerion. Hagar and Meraxes are like this. The dragons of the later Targaryen family have given up similar names, but the one in front of me still calls him. The dragon has such an ancient name. Could it be that when the Valyrian Empire was destroyed, more than just the Targaryen Dragon King family escaped? Illyrio didn't know, but this was definitely not good news, because the concept that dragons equal true kings has been deeply rooted in people's hearts over the past few hundred years. Clay got off the dragon's back and quietly pressed a Quen seal with his left hand. He had to be careful. If this greasy guy went crazy and attacked him, he had to be prepared. Sir Governor, I am here hoping to get some news about this continent. I think you can clear up my doubts. Clay's tone was very arrogant, and he tried to put himself into a descendant of the Dragon King family who had been in power for a long time. He made himself a Vest, Nori Baleris. This surname that is very similar to Balerion is actually one of the ancient Dragon King families of the Valyrian Empire. They actually went extinct after the collapse of the Valyrian Free Fortress, but no one can prove this. Therefore, Clay made up such a Vest. As for other things, isn't it up to him? Anyway, with the dragon in hand, even if he claims to be the Emperor of the Valyrian Empire or something like that, the governors have to admit it. Anyway, they only have the right to interpret. Of course, this is my honor. I don't know how to call you. My name is Illyrio Mapates, and I am the ruler here. He deliberately said that he was the ruler. In fact, he was trying to prevent Clay from coming into contact with other governors of Pentos. Although he knew that this was very difficult, the dragon's presence was definitely not a secret, and those greedy people would definitely come looking for him. You can call me Nori. As for my family, hey, the noble people in my family have the purest blood of the Dragon King. Clay said this with a contemptuous tone, full of arrogant pride when mentioning his family. Illyrio didn't dare to ask any more questions. This arrogant and mysterious Dragon Knight seemed to have a powerful Dragon King family behind him. He was definitely not a Targaryen. On the one hand, he was happy that this man would not compete with little Aegon for the throne of Westeros, but on the other hand, he was deeply worried. Such a young man has such a powerful dragon. Does that mean that there are still many dragons living in this corner of the world? If they were preparing to return to the Valyrian freehold, they would sooner or later notice Westeros, and Illyrio did not think that the violent dragonlords would give up the opportunity to conquer a continent. As soon as he sat down on the soft sofa in Illyrio's spacious long hall, an extremely harsh noise sounded outside the circular corridor, and Clay could even clearly identify the sound of weapons clashing. Obviously, some people don't want to stay here and talk to Illyrio alone. Clay sat comfortably on the sofa, looking at Illyrio who was sitting on pins and needles opposite him, and slightly raised the corners of his mouth. Chapter 152. The pastry tastes really good. Governor Audra was very lucky that he had not been working on women for a long time last night. As a pampered governor of Pentos, he had already tasted the beautiful women on both sides of the strait. Now, in order to live longer, he chose to restrain his desires. Because he was not sleeping deeply, he could hear the housekeeper slamming the wooden door of his bedroom hard at the risk of offending his taboo. The noise woke up the governor from his dream. The angry governor was like a raging bull, and he was about to go out and kill this despicable person for disturbing his sleep. Unexpectedly, the first words of the butler when he saw him made him give up all his thoughts. "My lord, dragon, dragon. A living dragon has landed in Governor Illyrio's house." The panting butler obviously knew the seriousness of this matter. If he waited for his master to wake up before reporting it, he knew his master's temper, and he would inevitably die. Therefore, he might as well take a gamble and directly break the rules. Wake up the owner. Sure enough, his bet was right. After being stunned for a while, Governor Audro grabbed the butler's collar. His eyes were as wide as bells, and he shouted loudly, "Did you read that correctly? Are you sure it's a dragon, not some big bird?" The housekeeper pointed at the soldiers who were following him to watch the night, and hissed, "My lord, they can all testify, and everyone in the city has seen it." Audro looked at the people behind him. When he saw everyone nodded, he loosened his grip and the thin butler fell to the ground and gasped. Audro almost squeezed him to death. After hesitating for less than 2 seconds, Audro issued his governor's order. "Go, call the guards, let's go to Illyrio's house immediately. Not to mention where this dragon comes from, even if it crawls out of the grave, we can't let him eat alone with that dead fat man." Soon, the cheering guards were assembled, and under the leadership of Audro, they rushed directly to the gate of Governor Illyrio's luxurious courtyard. Coincidentally, he met another governor of Pantos at the door. Obviously, both of them were quick to react and had the same purpose. Illyrio must not be allowed to meet the dragon alone. Although they didn't even know that Clay existed or had any connection with Illyrio, this did not prevent them from immediately leading troops to the door. There must be a balance between the various governors of Pantos. Anyone who dares to cross will attract the cruelty of others. Blow! Governor Illyrio's guards were startled by the sudden appearance of these soldiers. They were all members of the governor's guards. Although they were not the same master, they were all in the same system and could be considered old acquaintances. At that moment, someone opened his mouth and asked, "Mr. Governor Audro, what are you doing here?" Of course they knew that the dragon had landed in the courtyard of their governor, but they could delay it for a while. These guards, who were well fed by the governors, still had a certain degree of loyalty to their master. "Get out of the way, otherwise you will die here today." Governor Audro was disheveled, but showed no mercy at all. He held a huge long knife and struck it directly in the face of the Illyrio guard soldier. While the soldier was still hesitating, Governor Audro, who couldn't wait for a moment, slashed with his sword, causing blood to splash everywhere. Seeing that he had taken action, the rest of the people naturally followed suit. As a result, all the guards outside the carved gate fell in a pool of blood within a minute. The gate opened, and Governor Audro and another governor rushed in. In the courtyard of Governor Illyrio. As soon as they arrived at the entrance of the courtyard, the two saw the huge blue-gold dragon nesting in the center, with a pair of clear reddish dragon eyes staring at them, with a dangerous light inside. Galisos was waiting for Clay's order. If it were the only one here and greeted him with just a breath of dragon flame, how could it still be so hesitant and cautious here? Seeing that the intruder's eyes were attracted to Galisos, Clay glanced at Governor Illyrio, who looked very unhappy, and said directly without waiting for him to speak, "Friends who are here, you might as well come here to talk. I think Governor Illyrio is a hospitable host, right, my lord governor?" Hearing this, Illyrio cursed vaguely in his heart, but withdrew an extremely ugly smile on his face, nodded, and said, "Yes, my lord, my mansion welcomes all guests." 5 minutes later, Audro and another governor sat on 3 sofas, staring at each other, and the meaning in their eyes was clear. "Get out now, the dragon knight is mine." Clay leaned on the sofa, tasting a special fruit of Pantos, and watched the performances of the 3 governors in front of him. The arrival of these two completely ruined Illyrio's deception plan. Who doesn't know who Illyrio is? Illyrio supports Aegon Targaryen's ascension to the throne. Although they don't know that young Aegon is Illyrio's son, the support itself cannot be hidden from these well-informed governors. An awkward atmosphere filled every inch of the air in the courtyard. If any of them had had a private conversation with Clay here, they would have had a lively conversation and achieved some actual progress. But now, Clay was watching the 3 of them alone, and there was a blue-gold dragon staring at them like a barbecue steak. None of these 3 powerful governors of Pantos dared to speak first. Clay is not in a hurry. This place is not his home anyway. When he gets bored, he can just ask Galisos to open his mouth a little, and he can force these 3 people to reveal the current whereabouts of deaneries. As for what else he wants from these 3 people, oh, of course there is enough gold and troops. Unfortunately, these 3 are not yet on the same front with him. This is not quite accurate. Illyrio must be replaced. This person who supports the fake Aegon Targaryen to compete with Clay for women and the throne is simply intolerable to his uncle, and even more unbearable to his aunt. Clay is keeping him now, just because he doesn't want to overly stimulate Pantos. After all, he has just arrived in Essos as a descendant of the Dragon King family. It would be great to directly bring blood and fire, but he wants to have what you do is difficult. Why, do you three have any concerns? Don't worry, Galisos has eaten enough today and has no interest in you. Dragons are generally interested in people only when they are extremely hungry. Clay's words were extremely calm, but it sent chills down the backs of the three governors present. This man spoke so firmly about the dragon recipe. Have they tried it before? Reminiscent of what he just said about having eaten enough today, the three of them glanced at Galisos without leaving any trace. It's better not to anger this ignorant dragon knight. What if the dragon moves around a lot and gets hungry again? Too dangerous. Our lives are too precious to be eaten by dragons. I think the three of you might not be able to talk if you stay together. Then you can come over and talk to me one at a time. Is that okay? Clay's tone was very flirtatious and seemed to be discussing, but as Galisos let out an angry roar with understanding, the three governors immediately agreed to Clay's order. The first person to stay was naturally the owner of this place, Governor Illyrio, who had just had time to say hello to Clay. The governor, who was wearing a bright yellow broad robe, was holding his dirty golden beard with one of his fat hands. There were beads of sweat all over his forehead, and he looked very nervous. Clay looked at the old boy who was already on his list and sneered in his heart, but on the surface he still had the same arrogant expression that deserved a beating. He asked contemptuously, "Governor Illyrio, how many fleets can you Pantos pull out? Please think carefully about your answer to me. If it is lower than the number in my mind, I will represent my family and ask Pantos to replace him. A more capable governor." The words were serious nonsense, but they frightened Illyrio. It wasn't that he didn't have a city and his level was too low, but that there was a big guy next to him, staring at him eagerly. Who could replace him? Everyone has to panic. Sir Nori we Pantos and I don't know about the other guys. Anyway, I can provide you with 50 elite ocean-going battleships. Good guy, he is indeed a rich man from a trading city, a middle-ranking governor, and he casually mentioned 50 warships. It seems that the strength of his own fleet really needs to be strengthened. Clay nodded calmly. He looked at Illyrio's complicated eyes, with the cynical expression still on his face. He opened his arms and said with a smile, "The governor is indeed a good friend of my Belarus family. So, as a friend, I can answer your 2 questions as a reward for offering your fleet." Don't think this is nonsense, because Clay is pretending to be a powerful one. He made up a non-existent Dragon King family for the governors, making them feel that Clay is an advanced team. If they dare to refuse Clay's request, the next moment just more dragons coming to burn down the house. The Dragon Kings of the ancient Valyrian Empire had done this before, as had the Targaryen family that ruled the 7 kingdoms. They all had criminal records. No wonder the governors of Pantos were so obedient. "My lord, you were saying that you are from the Belarus family. Can you introduce it to me?" Clay smiled. He had already guessed that Illyrio would ask this question, but it was not simple. He only had one mouth and the story was all made up. It's so hard for our ancestors that we led our people to escape from the catastrophe of Valyria's end. It's so hard for our ancestors that we went through so much hardship to take refuge on the continent south of the Sea of Smoke. The Belarus family took in the remnants of the Valyrian Empire there and intermarried with the local residents. After such a long time, they finally restored part of the strength of the empire. He, Nori Belarus, was the pioneer of the family. Returned to the continent of Essos again, wanting to understand the current situation of this lost land of the empire. Perfect and reasonable. If you don't believe it, it doesn't matter. Anyone is welcome to go to the southern part of Yanhai to investigate. If you can find it, you've seen a ghost. Second question, I would like to ask your lord, is the noble Belarus family interested in the continent of Westeros on the other side of the narrow sea? After hesitating for a long time, Governor Illyrio finally asked about this matter. The problem with Westeros is that even if he doesn't tell himself, Lord Nori Belarus will still learn about it from other people's mouths. Rather than that, it is better to put it forward in advance, and maybe you can take over the hands of this lord and the Belarus family, and help young Aegon ascend to the throne of the 7 kingdoms. The worst case is that the Iron Throne will surrender to the newly born Belarus family. Pay tribute if they really are a powerful family with many dragons. Clay glanced at Illyrio calmly. He didn't expect this guy to be so bold. He actually dared to take the initiative to bring up the Westeros continent, which was not part of the ancient Valyrian Empire at all. Of course, except Dragonstone. In the original script, the entire Westeros was regarded as a piece of cake by young Aegon and his son. Now, it is really strange that they would offer to share it with the Belarus family. But when Clay thought about it, he understood Illyrio's plan to retreat in order to advance. I was the first to propose Westeros. You, the Belarus family, don't know about it, right? Even if you are willing, someone needs to lead the way. We happen to be familiar with this matter. At this time, little Aegon, the fake Targaryen, was pushed out and knelt in front of the proud Baleri's family. At this time, the rival family that once competed for the supreme leadership of the Valyrian Empire surrendered and only asked to be a remote continent of the empire, of a vassal king. Why did House Baleri's, who aimed to restore the territory of the ancient Valyrian Empire, reject this gift? Unless their strength would have conquered the world long ago. However, with this strength, why do they still come to Pantos to find Illyrio and other local natives to help? It can be said that Governor Illyrio has a good grasp of people's hearts, but unfortunately, what he met was Clay Manderly, a bastard who was full of lies and nothing he said was true except for his face. All efforts are in vain. Clay pretended to be thoughtful, then waved his hand after a moment and laughed. I know that place in Westeros. Our once lucky old friend Targaryen has ruled there for a long time. Now it seems that it is no longer possible. The dragon is gone and the throne has been occupied by his subjects. They themselves cannot. There's no point in trying to get that place if we want it. Hearing these words, Illyrio observed Clay's face that didn't seem to be fake, and the excitement in his heart could not be suppressed. Great, the reaction of the proud Baleris was completely within his expectations. Okay, Governor Illyrio, my conversation with you is over. Let's let another governor come. The same commanding tone came out again, and Illyrio was helpless. He was thinking of saying something else, but when he noticed Clay's extremely cold eyes, he stopped instantly. Afterwards, the conversation between Clay and Audro and another governor was not so harmonious. Both governors claimed that Illyrio was the biggest liar in all of Pantos. Your Excellency, you are not safe in this place at all. Come to my home is the safest. Clay didn't know whether these opinions were valid, but he did learn from Governor Audro that Daenerys Targaryen had appeared in Slaver's Bay less than half a month ago. Obviously, these governors have been sending people to pay attention to Daenerys' situation. Otherwise, there would be no such timely news. This governor, who obviously had a grudge against Illyrio, told Clay everything about Illyrio's plan to revive the Targaryen dynasty. Of course, it was pieced together from the information he had, and it was still far from the truth. But it didn't matter, because Clay later confirmed Daenerys' specific location from another governor. It was indeed near Slaver's Bay. That would be much easier. Let's start cross out, let's set off. Let's go. Alas, I haven't saved the manuscript again, MMD. Chapter 153 Accident Daenerys? Sir Barristan Selmy, the Kingsguard who had experienced 2 dynasties, now gave up the white robes that had followed him for decades and also gave up his past. To a certain extent, his job as the Kingsguard of the Iron Throne of Westeros in the first half of his life was actually a huge failure. As Aerys Targaryen's Kingsguard, he failed to fight with the king until the end, and was stabbed to death in the back by his betrayer. He also failed to protect the young heirs of the Targaryen family. Although he was not in King's Landing when the city was broken, he never thought that this was not his responsibility during these years. As Robert Baratheon's white-robed guard, in his opinion, everything he did was incompetent. He knew very well how Robert died. When he was hunting in the Kingswood, he could follow the king. What really made him take off his white robe and completely choose to end their past relationship was the shameless betrayal of the entire Westeros law by the Lannister mother and son. In the throne room at that time, he was the only one standing on Duke Eddard Stark's side. He had no doubt about the legitimacy of the king's edict. However, when the queen easily tore up the paper in front of him with a 6-mile, when he came to bear the edict that carried the weight of a kingdom, he knew that he was still naive. What happened next became so natural that all the Kingsguard, Robert Baratheon's most caring and loyal guards during his lifetime, knelt at the feet of such a child king without hesitation. And he only had a few days left in the Red Castle where he had lived for decades. In the throne room, seeing the boy embroidered with lions all over his body, wearing a golden crown, sitting crookedly on the Iron Throne, and after ordering him to take off this white robe that he considered a shame, Barristan was finally relieved. No one can give him a hard time. After all, this is a man who has worked for the royal family for decades, and he is already a bad old man. He has no future. Although Sir Barristan's current swordsmanship can still cut the throats of many people with ease, Selmy was also a once famous surname, and the family welcomed his return. However, the former captain of the Kingsguard refused because he had other pursuits. So, after several twists and turns, now his name is Astan, the white-bearded Astan, and he has returned to the red dragon flag with a black background, but his life has changed. Now he was on the ship heading to Astapor, and his master, the last heir of the dragon family, was beside him. Tell me, how big can a dragon grow? The young queen asked her followers in her unique magnetic voice. The reason why I say they is because Barristan is not the only one here. Jorah Mormont, the knight, who was exiled by Eddard Stark himself, is now also following Daenerys. However, with a warrior's intuition, Barristan always felt that something was wrong with the way this also elderly knight looked at Daenerys. It's not so much admiration as it is the pleasure of seeing prey. Although this description is not appropriate, that's what it is. The banished knight immediately answered the queen's question. He said in a cheerful voice, "Your Majesty, dragons will never stop growing. I heard that the largest dragon, the mount of your ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, is called the Black Death. Its wingspan can cover half of King's Landing." Seeing Her Majesty the Queen's purple eyes attracted to him, Jorah Mormont felt satisfied. He was about to say something more, but the three dragons nestled around Daenerys suddenly action. The first person to react was the black and red dragon that was already 2 people in size. Daenerys named it Drogon. Originally, the well-fed dragon was sleeping soundly at the feet of his mother, but he seemed to suddenly sense what he woke up directly from his deep sleep. Its brothers, the Green Regal and the Milky White Viserion, after their elder brother reacted, they also raised their slender snake-like necks as if facing a powerful enemy. A low roar came from Drogon's mouth, and everyone noticed this scene. Frowning her beautiful brows, the little Queen Daenerys reached out her hand to touch Drogon's back. She didn't know why her children reacted like this suddenly, so she wanted to comfort them first. However, just as she put her hand on the black dragon's back, the black dragon's scales exploded, and the dragon's mouth suddenly opened and roared at her mother. Dragons don't know human language, but this sudden and extremely abnormal behavior still made Daenerys realize that something was threatening her children. How can this be? Dragons are the most powerful creatures in the world. They are never afraid of other creatures in the world, even if they are still too small. These creatures are much larger than them. But now what's going on? Daenerys couldn't understand. The next moment, 3 dragons fluttered their wings and rushed towards the sea on the port side of the warship. "Drogon!" Daenerys shouted, but the black dragon ignored its mother and rushed in that direction as quickly as possible like an arrow off the string. Its 2 brothers had the same reaction. They followed closely behind their brother's tail, looking for the source of their uneasiness. "Your Majesty, something is wrong. There is something that scares the dragon. It must be like this." Barristan's old body suddenly stood upright, like a javelin, and he held the long staff tightly in his hand. Although there was no sharp sword in his hand, the fearless Barristan was still worthy of him. Name. Jorah Mormont also felt that something was wrong, but he did not want this old man to show off in front of Her Majesty the Queen. The long sword on his waist was unsheathed with a clang, and he did not forget to mock, "Old guy, take care of yourself. Don't let anything happen and you'll be so scared that you can't hold your broken stick." As soon as he finished speaking, a roar that resounded over the sea suddenly rang in everyone's ears, directly prompting Jorah Mormont's subsequent taunts, Barristan's counterattack, and Daenerys' order to shut up. If anything, it all went back into his stomach. Daenerys kept her eyes on her child. She clearly saw the 3 dragons flying to the left. But after hearing the huge roar, they changed direction and climbed rapidly upwards. The weather was not good today, or there was no good weather at sea. Thick clouds blocked Daenerys' sight. However, the next second, the owner of the huge roar appeared in front of them. A giant blue-gold shadow instantly broke through the clouds and swooped directly down towards the 3 little guys of the same race who were facing it. A series of slightly excited roars made everyone in this world lose their voice. On Galisos' back, Clay shook his head helplessly. Sure enough, the aggressive nature of the dragons was really buried deep in their flesh and blood. It took him so much effort to find Danielle with it. See, in his party, Galisos couldn't help it. It had discovered the existence of its own kind a long time ago, and passed one thought after another to its master. There was only one sentence: "I want to fight with them." Galisos did not consider that with its current size, doing so was completely bullying people, bullying the dragon. After getting Clay's permission, he rushed towards the target on the sea without wasting a second. The dragon wings were waving violently. Galisos was slowing down, otherwise he would plunge directly into the water. The violent airflow flowed beside its wings and blew towards its 3 small kin. 7 gods above, how is this possible? Barristan's snow-white beard was trembling. This former royal guard who had served the Targaryen family for so many years and could only stare at the giant dragon bone hanging in the throne room in a daze every day could not believe his eyes at all. What did he see? A huge blue-gold dragon, fighting with Her Majesty the Queen's 3 dragons. Oh, fighting? What was going on? In front of him, 4 dragons that had disappeared from Westeros for more than 100 years actually appeared. He reluctantly accepted the existence of the 3 little dragons that Daenerys gave birth to, but he was completely unprepared for the sudden appearance of this big guy, which completely subverted his cognition. Clay doesn't know what Barristan thinks. He still doesn't know who is on the ship. He is trying hard not to drink the wind. Galisos is already having fun. After this guy discovered that his own race was much smaller than him, his desire to fight weakened a lot and was replaced by another emotion. Clay didn't know how to describe it. In his opinion, this was Kai Guaguo's teasing! Exclamation in terms of speed and strength. Galisos completely crushed Daenerys' 3 children. Clay could feel that Galisos had no intention of killing at all. The long tail swung and lightly slapped the menacing Drogon. The strongest of the 3 brothers was immediately whipped in a circle and dropped to the sea. However, Galisos did not exert any force at all and Drogon quickly recovered. He flapped his wings and stopped the falling momentum. There was a trace of annoyance in the dragon's eyes. He roared and moved towards Galisos again. Rushed over. Before it reached the eyes, a puff of dragon flame was sprayed out. However, it was still too small now, and the dragon flame could not cause any damage to Galisos' already thick scales. Galisos glared at this persistent black guy, and a thought passed to Clay. Master, I want to spray it. This thought smacked of being aroused. Dragons are proud creatures. It is not their principle to be dragons and not to fight back when being sprayed by their own kind. Clay was holding Galisos' back with both hands, so naturally he couldn't free his hands to rest on his forehead. This guy was playing tricks on his head. This was not possible. If these 3 little guys really made Galisos anxious, the dragon's mouth opens one mouth at a time and it's over. Stop making trouble. Do you want to eat roasted dragons when you take this mouthful of dragon flames? Spit into the sea. I can scare you. Clay hurriedly gave orders to his dragon and used a few fingers to make the Yaxi seal, trying to calm down the dragon, which was developing towards an irritable old man. After all, dragons are creatures made of magic and flames. The Yaxi seal was surprisingly effective against such a large target. Clay heard a roar of obvious dissatisfaction. Galisos opened its dragon wings and directly knocked over the 3 little guys who were heating it. He held a mouthful of dragon flames in his mouth. He couldn't find the target for a long time. The dragon's eyes saw the warship that had stopped on the sea. At least this guy was not carried away by his anger and knew that the master was coming for this ship, so a ray of dragon flame spread across the sky and into the sea, directly sinking into the sea not far from the battleship. The dragon flames entered the water, and the scorching heat actually created a bomb-like effect on the sea surface. The water splashed and drenched the stunned people on the boat. After Galisos finished vomiting, Clayton felt an emotion called comfortable tilde coming from his dragon, which made his face twitch slightly. He didn't know if other dragons were like this, but why was his own situation like this? Clay would never admit that this matter had anything to do with him. Galisos must have learned it while staying on Sister Island. He let out a deafening roar towards the 3 little guys who were still trying to charge. The meaning was obvious. Are you convinced? Clay didn't know how they communicated with each other, but the 3 guys were fairly clear-headed and knew that the big blue-gold guy in front of them meant no harm. Otherwise, he would have been torn apart long ago. The black dragon Drogon yelled unwillingly at Galisos, who was many times his size, and then took his brother back to his mother's side, although he did not realize that his mother had been completely stupid. Originally, Daenerys' sanity had been severely dealt a blow after Galisos appeared and became shaky. But when she saw the figure on Galisos' back, her brain was overloaded and she immediately froze in place. The little queen is now filled with one thought. Is there anyone in this world who can control a dragon? Exclamation after swallowing hard, Sir Barristan, who had seen a lot, was the first to recover from the shock. He looked at the huge figure of Galisos hovering around the warship, and he had many thoughts for a while. He forced himself to accept this incredible fact and forced himself to think about it. He also saw the knight on the dragon's back, and at the same time, he also saw the hope and crisis of the future. If this dragon and its owner join the red dragon banner with a black background, then what does this mean for 2 dragon knights? If nothing else, if this dragon knight is a male, then the inheritance of the Targaryen family, no more problems. Barristan was too far away to see clearly the figure on the dragon's back, but he had a hunch that it was a powerful man. The crisis ensued. The old knight knew very well that besides the Great Wall, Daenerys was the last Targaryen in the world, so theoretically, the throne of the Targaryen family would belong to her alone. However, after Westeros experienced the dance of blood dragons, it is an indisputable fact that men have higher inheritance rights than women. The 7 kingdoms need a king and the queen will bring doubts. The giant blue-gold dragon circled for several times and finally lowered its height. It used a familiar paw to place itself on the side of the ship, but this time it learned the lesson and did not put all its weight on it. Relax, Galisos, let's have a good chat with Her Majesty the Queen. Clay smiled and patted Galisos on the back. Under everyone's surprised gazes, Clay got off the dragon's back and immediately saw the silver-haired woman in a plain dress next to an old man with a white beard. Under Daenerys' eyes that wanted to suck him in, Clay smiled and said to Daenerys, "Accident, Daenerys Targaryen?" Chapter 154 The Last Dragon Knights. Clay didn't know who the two people standing next to Daenerys were. One of them looked like a white-bearded grandfather, and the other looked like a sloppy knight. Theoretically, this younger man, who was looking at him warily in a standard knight's sword-holding posture, should be more dangerous than the old man holding a long staff, but Clay vaguely feels that this old man is him. More to pay attention to. Thinking about the people following Daenerys at this point in time, Clay could roughly guess the identities of these two people after thinking about it for a moment. The 8th achievement is Sir Barristan Selmy and Daenerys' second-in-command, Jorah Mormont. Hearing Clay call out her name accurately, Daenerys forced herself to calm down. She knew that this dragon knight who she didn't know how to face was coming for her. The huge dragon head was right in front of her. Although she also had 3 small dragons, Daenerys was inferior in terms of momentum to the behemoth in front of her. Pursing her lips, Daenerys looked at Clay's face, trying hard to find the outline of a family member in her memory from this face. Unfortunately, it backfired and she didn't see what she wanted. "Won't you introduce yourself?" It's not the behavior of a gentleman to ask like this. Daenerys didn't know how to answer Clay's question. Was it surprising or not? This is all inappropriate. The little queen is trying to take the initiative in the conversation, which is her habit. Clay's eyes reflected Daenerys' nervous and uneasy face, and when his mind moved, an expression of impatience suddenly appeared on his face. Galisos heard his master's thoughts and moved his eyes away from the silver-haired woman in front of him, whom he felt a little close to, and looked at the knight holding the sword beside him. Clay also turned his face towards Jorah Mormont and sneered, "Who am I? I can tell you, Daenerys, but this is not a clean place. Someone is polluting the environment here, am I right?" "Varys' good spy, Jorah Mormont." The words were spoken lightly, but they sounded like thunder in the ears of Daenerys and Jorah Mormont. Barristan Selmy looked at Clay deeply and said nothing. He knew what Jorah Mormont was doing, but now his identity was in doubt, so he did not reveal Jorah's identity to the queen. But now, this mysterious dragon knight actually told the truth. Obviously this be an insider. And the most important thing is that he definitely has something to do with Westeros. He even knows Jorah Mormont. This is definitely not something that a person who has never been in Westeros can know, unless there is someone behind him. An extremely powerful intelligence organization. After hearing Clay's words, Daenerys suddenly turned her head and looked blankly at the middle-aged knight who had sworn allegiance to her. She did not believe Clay's words, but she also believed that Clay would never act without aim. Jorah Mormont's face was polished by the sea breeze until it was like a rock, and instantly turned pale. He didn't know how he was exposed. Only he and Lord Varys of King's Landing knew about this matter. How could it be? Daenerys, I didn't. That's not it. Watching this man's performance, Clay decided to add to the fire. He stood there with his arms folded and sneered, "You are still acting here. You are just bullying Daenerys because she has never lived in Westeros. Do you need me to make it more clear? What did you send to the octopus spider when you were in Karth?" As soon as these words came out, the last trace of blood disappeared from Jorah Mormont's face. He stared at Clay in disbelief, his lips pursed white, but he couldn't say a word. "I've left you with dignity, Jorah Mormont, in the vast sea. If you don't want to be my Galisos lunch, just stay aside and avoid being an eyesore here." Clay's tone was very rude, and anyone could see the disdain in his eyes when he looked at Jorah Mormont. At this time, Galisos roared at the right time, shattering Jorah Mormont's last courage to forcefully explain. He lowered the tip of Clay's sword, looked at Daenerys for the last time, and said sadly, "Walk towards the stern of the ship." Daenerys looked at the back of Jorah Mormont silently, feeling a strong sense of unreality. The subordinate she thought was the most loyal had come here, after all the hardships from the Dothraki steppe. The person turned out to be the usurper's spy. She felt aggrieved, but she didn't know who to vent to, and her heart hurt. This was the first time she felt betrayed. Biting her red lips, Daenerys took a deep breath. Now was not the time for her to hide in bed and cry silently. Jorah's departure made her completely at a disadvantage in this conversation. "Okay, you got what you wanted, let's go to the boat, Dragon Knight." Clay nodded, stretched out his hand to signal Daenerys to go first, then stopped Barristan Selmy, who was following Daenerys closely, and whispered, "I know who you are, Sir Barristan. Don't worry, I'm not your enemy, but there are some words that are not suitable for you to listen to right now. Can you give us a space to talk?" After Jorah Mormont's identity was easily exposed, Sir Barristan anticipated this scene. He sighed deeply and did not insist. He just said, "I hope you keep your promise, Dragon Knight, you know what she means." "Of course, otherwise I wouldn't come to her." Clay smiled and walked alone to the height of the bow, where Daenerys was waiting for him. There is no one here because Clay does not intend to let others know his identity. This vest of a member of the Ballyries family can be worn in front of other people, but in the presence of Daenerys, who speaks High Valyrian as her native language. It is easy to be exposed in front of others. Clay knew that this little queen was also an extremely sensitive person, and there was no need for him to hold her grudge over such things, even though he was here just to steal her crown. As you wish. Now, can you tell me who you are? Purple eyes looked over Clay's body repeatedly. This was the first answer Daenerys wanted to know about Clay. Clay no longer had the appetite to prey on Daenerys. A smile appeared on his face and he said slowly, Clay Mandler, that's my name. Manderly? Daenerys' beautiful eyebrows suddenly knitted together. She had heard of this name before. Although she was a wandering princess, she obviously had a good knowledge of aristocratic heraldry. After rummaging through her memory for a while, she settled on bye-bye. Hong Kong's ruling family. But immediately, her expression became very ugly. Daenerys looked into Clay's eyes and her voice was a little angry. The Manderlys of White Harbor, right? Clay Manderly, do you think I'm a fool? Of course Clay knew that she didn't believe it, because there were many points here that didn't make sense without explanation. He spread his hands helplessly, and Clay continued in a soothing tone. Don't be nervous, Daenerys. First, I am indeed Clay Manderly, the heir to the current Earl of White Harbor. Second, dragons and the blood of the Dragon King are your home, the ruins of Valyria to me. Yes, please remember this first, I will tell you in detail later. It took him a lot of effort to explain to his old man, but it was based on extremely low trust costs and knowing the basics. Now he has to explain to Daenerys, and he may not be able to make sense even in 2 days. Anyway, we have a long way to go, let's talk about it later. Although she felt that Clay Mandler was just lying to her, Daenerys couldn't help it. Okay, let's leave it at that. After all, I can't think of a reason for you to lie to me. Your dragon could burn all the people in this boat to death, but you didn't do it. So, I believe your statement for the time being, Clayman. Delay. Hearing Daenerys' self-defense speech, Clay felt happy. This little queen is quite interesting. Is it okay to convince himself? With his eyes scanning Daenerys' exquisite body, Clay nodded and waited for Daenerys to continue asking. Well, Clay Mandler, I don't know why you know I'm here, but I want to know more about what you want to do here to find me. Although Daenerys asked this, she already had some expectations in her heart, but she did not reject them, because obviously, Clay Mandler still recognized her as a descendant of the Targaryen dynasty. Let's talk about a cooperation with you, but let's not rush this. Before that, I want to ask, Daenerys, where are you heading now? The sensitive Daenerys originally wanted to report a fake position to the ignorant Clay Manderly, but when she thought that he could find her so accurately, and dig out such a big spy from her side, and gave up this idea. Slaver's Bay, Clay Manderly, I'm going to Slaver's Bay, there's what I want there. Unsullied, right? A specialty of a stepper, a good idea. Daenerys felt angry because the man in front of her guessed correctly again. This was a plan she had discussed with Jorah Mormont, who had just been expelled. It was impossible for outsiders to know about it. Gritting her teeth, there was obvious dissatisfaction in Daenerys' voice. She could not control her emotions well at the moment. Yes, Clay Manderly, you are right, I need an army. The usurper's flag is still flying over the Red Keep. Without an army, how can I take back my father's throne? Very well, Daenerys, this is your ambition, right? Then I can tell you that I support your choice and swear by my last name. Daenerys had vaguely guessed that Clay would say this. In fact, this was not surprising because everyone who followed her said this, and this was the only justification for her gathering the team. But she didn't understand one thing. If she remembered correctly, White Harbor, where Manderly belonged, was a great noble in the north with a well-established background and a powerful vassal under Eddard Stark. Why would he come to support her? This is hard to convince me. You want to support me? You nobles who raised armies against my father seem to call me the Mad King's daughter. Regarding Daenerys' statement, Clay spread his hands, grinned, and said softly, Don't worry, Daenerys. As I just said, the days are long and you will understand. Jorah Mormont, Clay did not use the mark of Axii on him, not because he was soft-hearted, but because he did not want to expose his Witcher skills yet. He has not reached any agreement with Daenerys now, but has just met. He doesn't know what the little queen thinks. Judging from today's performance, she must have frightened him more than he was surprised. Not trusting herself was her most correct reaction. If she acted like she completely trusted herself now, Clay would I doubt her motives. Clay only chatted with Daenerys for a while before ending this first conversation. He had to give the little queen enough time to think, and take his time. Anyway, Clay had plenty of time. He has noticed that there is nothing on this ship that can threaten his existence. Now Daenerys' career has not even started, and there are only a few followers. It was the presence of dragons, especially the aura of Galisos, that frightened the Dothraki who followed Daenerys. The place where the horses were placed under the cabin was filled with a fishy smell. Clay waved his hand and Galisos went to see to find food. Along with him were Daenerys' 3 little dragons, who now simply did not dare to confront this guy who was several times their size. It just so happened that they were also hungry. After hesitating beside Daenerys for a long time, Drogon was the first to spread his wings and follow Galisos' tail, flying towards the sea. His 2 follower brothers they also flew together. Standing on the bow of the ship, Clay looked at the sea in the distance, which was the direction of Slaver's Bay and the true starting point of Daenerys' career as the Dragon Queen. But now that I'm here, I'm afraid everything will become completely different. It's really interesting. To be honest, with the power of the Manderly family, even if they completely integrated the power of White Harbor and twins, they would still be at an absolute disadvantage in this war. There is no way to deal with the problem of the Stark family alone. Westeros is not a good place for powerful ministers to usurp the throne. The rigid social system means that betraying one's own lord is equivalent to betraying the entire aristocratic class. The current Manderly family simply does not have the ability to fight against the entire aristocratic class, not to mention that they themselves are members of the aristocracy. Clay's action of letting Galisos leave immediately made everyone on the ship breathe a sigh of relief. After all, this blue gold dragon put too much pressure on these people. Seeing Clay's figure, Daenerys, who came nearby with her maid, hesitated for a moment, then took a rough wooden cup from the maid's hand and walked towards Clay's position. Clay heard the footsteps, but he didn't look back. Most of his mind was thinking about the next step in dealing with Slaver's Bay, so he didn't pay much attention to things here. Clay Mandler, what are you looking at? I think the same sea surface is not worthy of your careful taste, right? Daenerys' unique voice sounded from behind Clay, interrupting Clay's thoughts. He glanced at Daenerys, who came to him, who handed him a glass of water. Clay took it and drank it without thinking. Daenerys was a little surprised by Clay's behavior. She didn't believe that Clay wouldn't consider whether there was something else in the water, but he just drank it. This trust was unreasonable. Aren't you afraid that I'll poison you? Clay curled his lips and thought, there are probably only a few drugs in the world that can poison me. Do you really think I'm stupid? Shaking his head, Clay said, there's no need. You and I are the last dragon masters in this world. Daenerys, you know very well. I don't have anything to worry about. Daenerys didn't listen carefully to Clay's words, because she suddenly realized something. This guy seems to have never called himself Her Majesty the Queen from the beginning. She carefully recalled every word she said to Clay, and she was convinced that in this Clay Manderly's heart, he seemed to be deliberately avoiding this point. Why is this? Daenerys seems to have the answer. Wow, this is really difficult to write about. It's really more difficult for women than for men. Chapter 155 Daenerys' embarrassment. Only the throne cannot be shared with others. This is a concept that Daenerys has been instilled in since she was a child. Viserys, the brother, is not good at all, but on this point, he does what he says. He died with his crown, even if it was not his will. Her brother's weak neck could not bear the weight of the crown. After he left, the family's hatred fell on Daenerys' smaller shoulders. Again, this was not what she wanted. Very early on, she thought that when she grew up, she would marry her brother who always bullied her. Although his wrath of the sleeping dragon always hurt her, she endured it. Daenerys, you must remember that the usurper has seized our father's throne. Our mission is to return to that homeland and bring blood and fire to those despicable rebels. Daenerys always remembered what her brother said. Only when he said these words, her brother looked a little like a king. Daenerys always felt that way. She originally thought that she was alone in this world. Although the Red Comet brought her 3 children, they were just children and did not understand her thoughts. Everyone around her followed her last name, Targaryen. What a glorious name. It meant the strongest claim to the throne of the 7 kings, and she knew it. No matter what they say, Daenerys only regards them as followers and her subordinates. She knows that the throne is narrow and can only accommodate one person in a crowded place. But in her heart, she still longed for someone who could talk to her as an equal, deal with the endless troubles for her, raise an army for her, and help her get the throne back. But now, this person appeared so suddenly, coming from the sky like a dragon, and all her pride was reduced. Daenerys didn't know how to face this person. There was another violent storm on the sea, which reminded Daenerys of the time when she was born. Maybe it was also such a violent storm. Staying in her cabin, her body swayed left and right with the ship, but Daenerys had long been accustomed to this, and she could no longer feel faint. Listening to the creaking of the wooden planks building the bulkhead, Daenerys' lavender eyes reflected a flickering candle, which was as swaying and enchanting as her white body. It was almost dusk at this time. That Clay Mandler riding that blue gold dragon, Galisos, was that called right? Yes, this is it. He took his 3 children out to sea to find food. She didn't know what she was thinking. Maybe she wasn't thinking about anything, but she knew that her mind was filled with that young face. Dung dung dung. A dull knock on the door disrupted Daenerys' thoughts. Someone was outside and Daenerys knew it. "Come in," Daenerys said softly. She didn't know who was outside, but it probably wasn't her maid. With a creak, the damp oak door was slowly pushed open, and Daenerys first noticed the iconic long white beard. "Astan, is it him? Why did he come to me?" Daenerys thought about it, immediately straightened her sitting posture, put away all her expressions, and pointed to the wooden barrel on the other side of the table, which was the stool on the ship. "Sit down, Astan, what do you want from me?" "Sorry, I don't have anything here to entertain you." Daenerys forced herself to disperse the disturbing thoughts in her mind, showed a decent smile, and said with a smile to the old man who was much older than his father, "That's not necessary, your majesty. I came to you to talk to you about Clay Manderly." Sir Barristan sat down opposite Daenerys as instructed. In one sentence, he clearly stated the purpose of his interruption. The old sir noticed that when he said these words, Daenerys' face changed. "It's very unnatural. Arstan, you are from Westeros. Do you know this Clay Manderly?" Taking a deep breath, Daenerys suppressed her surging emotions. She looked at Barristan and asked the question she had always wanted to ask. She wanted to know Clay Mandler's past so much. She was afraid that Clay Mandler was deceiving her. Maybe even the name was fake, but she was eager to know all the information about him. Daenerys didn't know what was wrong with her. She was troubled by this feeling because this was something she had never experienced in her life for more than 10 years. She didn't expect Barristan to give her an answer, but this feeling drove her to ask such a question. But unexpectedly, Barristan actually nodded after frowning and thinking for a while. "I knew him, sire, when he was at Winterfell." Barristan had always thought that he had heard this name somewhere before, and now he finally remembered it. At that time, he followed King Robert to Winterfell and there had been a conflict between nobles. He remembered that he was a noble from the north who killed on the spot a small noble from the Lannister branch who came with the queen. The noble from the north was imprisoned in the dungeon by King Robert. Now that he thought about it, the name of the noble from the north was Clay Mandler. "It's a pity that I didn't meet him at that time, otherwise, I guess I would be able to confirm his identity immediately during this meeting." Hearing Barristan's answer, Daenerys was stunned for a moment, then her eyes suddenly opened wide, and she immediately asked, "Astan, tell me everything you know, all the news about him." Daenerys' reaction surprised Barristan, but he quickly ignored it, concealed his identity, and slowly told Daenerys about Clayman from the perspective of a bystander. What Deled did in the north. Time flowed slowly with the rhythmic rocking of the cabin. I don't know how long it took, but Barristan finally ended his memories, leaving Daenerys in a trance who didn't know what she was thinking. His Majesty Barristan reminded Daenerys, and Daenerys suddenly woke up. The awkward look on her face disappeared. She thought for a while and concluded, "In other words, what you know about him is that he is a somewhat reckless northern nobleman for the sake of his family members. Well, he is also somewhat brave and dares to kill Lannister directly in front of the usurper." Daenerys is quite satisfied with Clay's ruthless killing of the Lannister. She believes that her father was at fault for both the Stark and Baratheon families in the usurper war. But it was the Lannister family alone. Tywin had been his father's hand of the king for so many years. In the end, his father still chose to trust Tywin, but in exchange for the Lannisters' bloody massacre of the Targaryens. For Daenerys, she can forgive anyone who has rebelled against the Targaryens, but only the Lannister family is on her must-kill list. "Perhaps, your majesty, but I have never seen his face. I still can't understand why the descendants of the Manderly family have the ability to control dragons. As far as I know, Aegon's bloodline is not the same as that of Manderly. Deled's blood has been mingled." Barristan frowned his grey eyebrows. This was a question he had never been able to figure out, because according to common sense, this was simply impossible to happen. Daenerys remembered what Clay said to her and decided to ignore the topic for the time being. She asked Barristan, "Jez, you haven't told me what you want to say to me yet, now is your time." The next moment, Daenerys regretted saying this, because Barristan's answer made her don't know how to sort out her mood. He said, "Your Majesty, if Clay Manderly's identity is confirmed, then as a subordinate who has sworn allegiance to you, I suggest that you conclude a marriage contract with this Clay Manderly that will be known to all 7 countries." Daenerys is no longer the little girl she was before, but this still doesn't allow her to remain absolutely calm at this time. She has thought about this, but she didn't expect that her followers would ask this question. "Well, this is a bit sudden. Astan, can we not talk about this for now?" I don't know why, but Daenerys' tone is no longer as strong as in previous conversations. She is a little evasive, with a hint of embarrassment. Barristan watched Daenerys' expression changes carefully. An unknown smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, but he continued firmly, "Your Majesty, I don't have to say this, but you must think about this issue carefully. Clay Mandler came from Westeros. You have met him now. If he cannot be on your side, then he and his dragon will become enemies that I can't defeat. Daenerys took over Barristan's words, and the latter nodded. It was obvious that Daenerys understood it correctly. You have also seen that his giant dragon, that big blue gold guy, and your 3 little dragons are no match for it in any case. The dragons are all growing up. When his dragon gets bigger, you will how to deal with him. When your dragon grows up, you can use the blood and fire of the Targaryen family to subdue all the traitors. But now the question is, how do you subdue the other Manderly family who can also bring blood and fire to the enemy? Woolen cloth? Seeing that Daenerys was silent, Barristan knew that she had heard what he said, so he made a final conclusion. Your Majesty, even if you can't accept him as your future husband for the time being, I suggest that you never antagonize him. Your dragon is not yet capable of fighting, but with him here, you can quickly pull Essos back. A large enough army. And then you will fulfill your brother's dream, your dream, to return to Westeros and reclaim the iron chair that belongs to House Targaryen. Clay, who was taking 4 foodies out to hunt for wild food, didn't know about the conversation that took place in the cabin. He didn't care much about what was going on in Daenerys' small team right now. In any case, they will all be their subordinates or vassals from now on. It doesn't matter if it happens sooner or later. Daenerys will not have a too bad attitude towards him. Clay still has this confidence. The key lies in Galisos, who is currently muttering about the 3 little ones competing with him for food. In other words, Clay and Daenerys now have the monopoly on dragon resources in the entire world, and Clay still has the first mover advantage and is in a leading position. Therefore, Clay is not worried about Daenerys at all. From the moment he appears in front of her, many things cannot be controlled by the few people around her. Jorah Mormont fired the gun just because he was unhappy with this salty middle-aged uncle. Moreover, Clay had other plans for him when he borrowed Daenerys' hand. After finishing cooking on the sea, Clay took Galisos and flew towards the location of Daenerys' boat. This was already close to the sea near Slaver's Bay, so he could not avoid being discovered. After all, people have to see it. Clay did not order Galisos to destroy the witnesses with dragon flames. His violence was not used on these civilians. He could imagine how the fleets coming and going on the sea would react when they saw the Galisos group, 1 large and 3 small, which could be called a group of dragons. Now, there must be a ship with its sails fully set, sailing desperately in the direction of Astapor, bringing news of the dragons to the slave owners who were sitting up. But it doesn't matter, let this news warm them up first, let them prepare everything they need to prepare. When Krajan comes to Astapor, all the monsters and monsters prepared by these slave owners will be ready. Burn it clean. He is not Daenerys, and he does not intend to change the political status quo of Slaver's Bay immediately, but he is bound to give some people a taste of blood and fire. The Dragon King must have the power of the Dragon King. Since these slave owners represent the greatest violence in Slaver's Bay, then, if you want to make them completely obedient, there is no other way but to bring them greater violence in the future. Let's go, let's send these 3 back first. Clay patted Galisos and the blue gold dragon roared to show that he understood. Then it flapped its huge wings and accelerated, flying in the direction it came from. Galisos couldn't stay on that ship for long. It was a small ship dozens of meters long, made of wood, and it was not an aircraft carrier. With such a big body and only such a thin deck, the ship would fall apart before it could reach Astapor. Therefore, Clay planned to separate from Daenerys first, just to give him enough time. Little Queen, think carefully. He himself took Galisos to Slaver's Bay to understand how this well-known slave city worked. If you want to turn this place into a rear area for exporting troops, you must use violence to change it unless the level of violence can reach the level of completely crushing the previous social system. Otherwise you will inevitably suffer backlash. Therefore, now that Clay and the 2 of them have no soldiers, the best strategy is to join with those who have reservations if they are not completely defeated, and then consider taking down these slave traders when their strength reaches a certain level. Clay has a flexible moral bottom line, and everything is based on his own actual interests. As for when to use what kind of moral bottom line to ask others, that is naturally his own decision. I'm a little late today, sorry. Chapter 156 What Astapor sees. The city of Astapor, located at the mouth of the Worm River, ushered in another peaceful morning. Most people in the city were the same as usual, and there were no special changes. Slaves are still fighting or working in the corners of this city for their own survival, while civilians who can be called a human are eating bread covered in grease and abusing their own people as a matter of course. Slaves. As the rulers of this city, the great good lords, they just got up from the body of the woman who was still a baby last night and is now dying, and began to enjoy today's good time with a clear mind. No one thinks there is anything wrong with this, because the good lords are the people who stand at the top of the entire Astapor social pyramid. This is something everyone knows, and the residence of the good lords is also in the pyramid. Standing on the huge platform called Pride Square in the center of the city, Clay held a piece of Estapper's specialty breakfast in his mouth. Well, it was probably a piece of oil cake or something like that. I don't know why, but Estapper likes things rich in oil from top to bottom. Of course, slaves are not included here. Daenerys' ship was still more than a day away from arriving here. Clay didn't wait for her. He wanted to see the city first. He landed a little further south of Estapper. As for Galisos, he asked this guy to find food on his own first. As long as he didn't eat people, he would take care of the rest. Anyway, this territory would be his own in the future, so there was nothing wrong with paying for it in advance. There is no danger for him to enter Estapper now. Even if there is, Clay believes that although this guy is a foodie, he is very smart and will come to protect him in time. Before leaving, he asked Daenerys for some gold. Although the little queen was also very poor, she still had some wealth. Again, it would all be his from now on. Clay was not polite to Daenerys at all. With one shot of Alder's seal, he knocked over 2 slave traders who wanted to capture him as slaves and drag him to Estapper to sell them at a good price. After Clay used the Axii seal to ask about the situation, he wiped them cleanly. Human neck. The equipment he wears is still a typical White Harbor style. In the realm of Estapper, this clearly tells others that you are a stranger who knows nothing. But it doesn't matter. The generous Estapper slave trader will give everything Clay wants to the respected Lord Clay Manderly without reservation. You see, the 2 people lying on the ground didn't have any objections. They very much agreed with Clay's behavior of taking away their equipment and letting them walk the birds in broad daylight, so much so that they didn't even say a word. So Clay, who smelled a little bit of blood and had a fierce aura, dressed in typical Eastern Continent clothes, swaggered into the city gate of Estapper. The defenders who originally wanted to kill Clay were deceived by Clay's obscure Yaxi shot and thought they had got a large piece of gold, grinning in amusement. He didn't know that he had brought in a living king of hell for his beloved good lords. The good lords didn't know how to repay the actions of this city defender. After randomly seducing a few greedy thieves into an alley and knocking them over cleanly, Axii asked for information with a confused face, and then sent them to meet the harpy he admired. The operation was very smooth and very professional. At first glance, it seemed like he had done this frequently. How should I put it? It was very bad. Clay, who had picked up equipment along the way, looked like a wealthy man in Estapper when he arrived at Pride Square. He was ready to visit the city. Although it was morning, as the largest slave trading center in Estapper, Pride Square was still very busy. Clay smelled the pungent perfume here and the unconcealed smell of human flesh. He was very emotional about this. Sometimes it is not a good thing to have a developed sense of smell. In such a gathering of fat people and sweaty people, it almost made him die on the spot. He tossed a small cloth bag in his hand, which was the trophy he took from the 2 slave traders. Inside was more than 20 gold coins circulating in Estapper. This thing is pretty well cast, with a huge pyramid on the front and an ugly harpy sculpture on the back, a bit like the gold mark circulating in Yunque next door. This place originally belonged to the ancient Gith Empire, so it is understandable that the coinage styles are quite different. I just don't know what the purchasing power is like. Clay can't always do $0 shopping in Estapper City. Sooner or later, he will be targeted by the men of these good lords, although he doesn't care much. Today seems to be a day when slaves are traded intensively in Pride Square. A high wooden platform has been erected in the center of the square, and a group of people are standing noisily underneath, commenting on the slaves on the platform. However, Clay made a rough observation and found that most of them were just joining in the fun, and those who really wanted to buy would not be standing here. On the left side of the high platform, there was a row of black and purple chairs made of an unknown type of wood. They were covered with soft cushions. 5 fat-headed guys were sitting on them, chatting to each other hypocritically. It seemed that they were the real customers of this slave auction. Clay decided to observe first and see if there was any chance to chat with these people. A political system, no matter how absurd and cruel it may seem to outsiders, as long as it operates in a place for a long enough time, there must be a reason for its existence. The so-called existence is reasonable. There must be a group of vested interests in this political system. Obviously, these overnourished guys are such people. If there is an opportunity to chat with them, it will be easier for Clay to understand the operating logic behind this city. After waiting for about 10 minutes, a guy wearing a toga robe walked onto the stage like a dog. Without looking at the crowd below, he bowed deeply to the 5 nobles and then shouted in an exaggerated tone, "Road, free citizens who are bathing in the glory of the good Lord, at this morning's trade fair, there were Dothraki women snatched from the Dothraki sea. These girls on horses are very hot. I want to ride them on my crotch. Will you become their call, free folk?" This guy's focused opening remarks, coupled with his exaggerated tone and movements, directly raised the atmosphere of the scene. Many men whistled. Obviously they knew a lot. This guy, who should be the auctioneer, used a similar method to introduce the goods to be sold this morning. After hearing this, Clay couldn't help but secretly sighed. These slave traders are really wild. They can get any kind of slaves. They have all the 9 major trading city-states, regardless of gender. There is also a guy whom this guy calls the exiled knight of Westeros. Clay is doubtful about this, and is ready to look at the family crest before speaking. I have big news to tell you. Good lords, please show mercy. The treasure that should have entered the pyramid to serve the good lords has been rewarded to you by your lordships. This is a Valyrian descendant with silver hair and purple eyes. Free people. The descendant of the Targaryen family has hatched her 3 dragons. Let me tell you that she, like this gift, is a descendant of Valyria. What are you waiting for? Free citizens, use your wealth to buy her back. Who knows, one day she will hatch a dragon for you. The ignorant people let out a cry of surprise, which was mixed with a sneer that they couldn't help but laugh. Clay didn't expect that he, who was silently eating here, could hear such an incredible sales pitch. He regretted why he didn't bring Daenerys with him. He especially wanted to see Daenerys finish listening to this. The expression of the words. Well, Daenerys is simply described as a female dragon that can lay eggs. That's right. When Daenerys comes, she must know what she looks like in this place. What kind of shackles breaker do you think you are? Save it, eat it one bite at a time, don't be in a hurry. In fact, this is bullying these stupid free people. What kind of Valyrian people? In Clay's opinion, this is probably a pure Lycian who happened to be captured. The ancient Valyrian bloodline was still very strong there, and most people had the appearance of platinum curly hair, which was rare in other places, but seemed common there. They are the native colonies of the Valyrian Free Fortress and have not experienced conquest, so they have retained their own racial characteristics. However, they are the most ordinary low-level Valyrians and are not descendants of the noble Dragon King. Therefore, they do not have the ability to resonate with dragons and cannot be recognized by them. To Clay, it was of little value. Under the auspices of the auctioneer, the slave auction soon became very lively, with shouts of bids coming and going. However, Clay discovered an interesting phenomenon. Every time he bid, everyone was waiting for the 5 people to do something. Bidding will be made only after representation. It seems that these guys have quite a high status in this place, and this seems to be spontaneous, and the citizens have become accustomed to it. Clay touched his chin, thinking about the meaning behind this phenomenon. There must be a reason behind Daenerys' rule in Slavers Bay collapsing so quickly. Although there must be some inertia from the old system, Clay himself must figure out what the force is that drives them. Clay did not take action at the auction, because there was no point in buying a few slaves now. His goal was to hook up with the good lords and then capture their unsullied ones. The auction lasted for about 2 hours. Clay noticed that the slave trade in Astapor was a typical buyer's market, where supply exceeded demand. But it's understandable if you think about it. Slave trading has become an industry in Slavers Bay. In such a hugely profitable industry, slave traders naturally catch more and sell more, but the local demand for slaves is only so great. After leaving the auction site, Clay figured out the purchasing power of the small bag of gold coins in his pocket. It was not bad and could allow him to live comfortably in Astapor for half a year. Unfortunately, he didn't have the opportunity to talk to these wealthy people who bought a large number of slaves, but it didn't matter, there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. After finding a hotel decorated with purple gauze, Clay opened a small house as his temporary residence. When he came to his room, Clay thoroughly enjoyed the depraved life bathed in the light of the good Lord. In this kind of fully slave-like hotel, as long as you can afford the rent, slaves will do everything for you. The slave brings water, the slave serves food, and the slave responsible for cleaning your room also works part-time to give you a massage, all of which are included in your rent. The bearded boss in a robe also solemnly promoted to Clay the services that the female slaves in the store could provide. How much did an ordinary female slave cost per night, and how much did a well-trained Dothraki female slave cost? The boss winked and told Clay that for just 1 gold tower coin, even the silver blonde-haired slave girl Clay had seen today could open her legs for Clay. Seeing that Clay still shook his head, the boss understood instantly and said that multiple ones were fine, as long as Clay had enough gold tower coins. Clay was finally convinced. This dazzling service introduction was all it took to give him a menu for him to choose from. It was really an eye-opener. He knew how to play, but he lost. This also exposes how low the status of slaves is in this poor place. No matter what you did before, as long as you didn't come here through normal means, you have only one identity, slave. Clay walked away thoughtfully, not noticing that the boss glanced at Clay's waist with disdain, then quickly looked away and began to sell his store's collection to another guy. What's interesting is that when Clay first traveled to Essos, he had never been to Slavers Bay and didn't know much about the customs here. Judging from my observations this morning, the entire rule of Slavers Bay is a pressure cooker that is forcibly held down. The reason why Daenerys was able to conquer these places so smoothly was that she released this force at the right time. Gas. But the problem is that after the pressure cooker is deflated, it is still a pot. Daenerys' subsequent series of reform operations are equivalent to throwing the pot aside and replacing it with a large vat full of loopholes. People who are used to living in the pot can no longer find their place in the vat. This will cause the regime that has lost military support to quickly fall apart, shatter into pieces, and then return to the rule of slave owners. This is a bit difficult to handle. I don't have many talents who can govern the country. Alas, Daenerys' small team has too few capable people. It is not enough to support a royal council. This matter must be dealt with as soon as possible. Lying on the soft big bed, chewing the fruit that the slave girl put into her mouth, Clay was thinking and talking to herself in a common language that she could not understand. He is not a morally obsessive person, and he will never refuse things that he should enjoy. However, he wants more. Daenerys kills the slave masters, takes thousands of Unsullied and runs away. This is called fishing for all. And now, he is thinking about how to turn Slavers Bay into his own backyard for producing troops, because there may be many enemies he has to face. The Manderly family's army was limited by the aristocratic system in the north and could not be easily moved, so he could only rely on himself. It's the end of the month, I promise to update it well next month. Can you give me some monthly tickets? Chapter 157. Is this too anxious? Clay stayed in the city for most of the day. In the evening of that day, the news that dragons appeared in the Sea of Astapor spread to every corner of Astapor through the fishermen who hurriedly returned to port. Listening to the resident who lived opposite him, but had no sense of distance at all, he pulled him and started chatting, telling vividly the news he heard at the port. Clay had a kind smile on his face, and he was already happy. Flower. Sure enough, the accuracy of a piece of news passed down from person to person is even more outrageous than Robert dragging Rhaegar out of the grave to dance the tango. It is obvious that there are only 3 little guys from Galisos and Daenerys. Listen to these. What? Friend, let me tell you, a group of dragons appeared on the sea in Astapor. I heard that it was such a big group. There must be more than 10 of them. Don't you think the dragons are already extinct? There are so many. Where do dragons come from? Are you scared? Let me tell you again, this is first-hand news. The leading dragon is as long as 2 large sailboats combined. What a behemoth it is. Look at you, you are stunned. It must be coming towards our Astapor. I heard that the leading dragon is silver. Tell me, should we let the good lord sacrifice 2 Valyri? Slaves of sub-bloodline, maybe the dragons can protect us Astapor. Hey, why don't you say anything? Clay was so upset that he really didn't know what to say. Good guy, except that the dragons were coming towards Astapor. There was really nothing wrong with this. Clay is also convinced. If anyone hires you as an informant, you will be fooled. But it's good. The reaction of these Astapor civilians at least shows that they are aware of the power of the dragon, which makes it easier to handle. Calculating the time, Daenerys' worship will dock tomorrow night, so I still have some time to take a look here. There is no way we are not in Westeros now. Although Clay is the richest young master of White Harbor, he is also a complete poor man in Slavers Bay. Otherwise, he would have used money by now. The offensive opened up the situation. After spending a relatively peaceful night in the store, Clay rejected the boss's recommendation and didn't even want the good stuff delivered to his door. He had no choice but to do so. The road was too wide and Clay was afraid of falling into it. It's not good to come out again. The next morning, Clay went out early. Today he wanted to inquire about the price of the Unsullied produced in this place. Now, he had to be prepared. It would be nice to just let Galisos fly over and burn these good lords to dregs with a burst of dragon flames, but it was still the same truth. This was tantamount to completely overturning Astapor's ruling framework. Clay didn't care if a few people died, but this meant that the Unsullied production line would have to stop production while Astapor was running for a long time. Clay and Daenerys have no foundation at all in this broken place. It is impossible to recruit people to quickly restart this production line. Why do they have to turn a long-term deal into a one-time deal, right? Therefore, in Clay's mind, the best result is to bleed the blood of these good people sitting at the top of the pyramid, and then support a few obedient ones to continue producing the Unsullied. As for himself, he used part of White Harbor's financial resources to purchase these Unsullied for military expansion and preparation for war. Of course, if he wanted to keep White Harbor from participating in things here, it was not impossible. There is a place called Bravos among the 9 major trading city-states, and there is a place called the Iron Bank. Clay can ride Galisos there to borrow money. As for what problems this will cause, such as whether it can be repaid, how much the interest will be, etc., Clay doesn't care. He doesn't plan to repay it anyway. After he has strengthened his troops and conquered Westeros, he must make an expedition across the sea to Astapor, for no other reason than to stop this gang of black-hearted capitalists who are destroying finance. Look, in order to make money, even the face of civilized people is lost, and they dare to slander the great Clay Manderly for borrowing money and not repaying it. Little Bravos actually has the right to ask the Iron Throne for money? Galisos Dr. carries. Spray them. This is what Clay plans to do under ideal conditions, but what if these slave owners just don't cooperate, and Clay or Daenerys accidentally turns these people into ashes? Clay has no interest in accompanying Daenerys to play the trick of conquering Slavers Bay. He came to Astapor to build an army. Now that the army production line has been burned, he has to find a way. Clay himself has no time to stay here as the king of Astapor on the surface, but actually a slave owner, and he can't leave Daenerys here. The little queen has to return to Westeros with him, and he wants to use her name to go to the other direction of the continent to find himself a very important ally. When that time comes, even if he captures a few slave owners from Meereen and comes to Astapor, Clay can't stop Astapor. After walking around the entire city of Astapor for a long time, Clay visited many taverns, which are the distribution center for all kinds of news. When there were fewer people, he would go to Axie, and when there were more people, he would covertly ask about various sources of the unsullied kind of information. The bad news is that in the entire Slavers Bay, only Astapor has a complete unsullied production chain, which is almost the main commodity exported by Astapor. The good news is that the production of the unsullied is not in the hands of one person. According to many people, each of the 5 good lords who currently rule the city-state holds the production capacity of the unsullied. This means that Clay can have the opportunity to divide and disintegrate them. If 1 or 2 slave owners really stay in that position, things will be difficult to handle. When the number of people increases to 3, things become interesting. Clay wandered around until dusk, finally satisfied that he had finished today's information collection work. Next, he went to the port to mingle with the crowd and meet the great Queen Daenerys Targaryen. The actions of him and Daenerys in Astapor must have a unified core guiding ideology. It is not okay for each to do his own thing. Clay and Daenerys must reach a consensus on these matters. Astapor also received news that Daenerys was coming, but for some reason, they did not show much enthusiasm, and not a single benefactor showed up. Clay didn't think it was because these good lords were not coming because it was getting late. In fact, according to his understanding, if there was money to be made, it would be okay to ask them not to sleep for 5 or 6 days, as long as they were still alive. There was only a small group of black leather-armored, unsullied ones on the dock, plus a few ordinary soldiers, led by a fat-headed guy who was probably a minor character, to greet them. Clay gradually began to understand the thinking of these slave owners. In their eyes, it doesn't matter whether Daenerys is the mother of dragons. In their eyes, she is just a beggar queen from Westeros. She is a guy with no luck. This is probably the label that the good masters have put on her. Such a person is not worthy of being greeted by the good masters at the dock outside the city at night. It's good, because it makes it easier for Clay to connect with Daenerys. However, he didn't tell the little queen that he was here. He would like to see how she reacts later. Daenerys' big ship slowly docked. It seemed that Astapor's dock was of good quality. It was actually a deep water port. This was really a good place to store a fleet. Clay stared at the docking position of the big ship and thought to himself, "Wait." In the golden sunset, the Targaryen's red dragon flag on a black background rustled in the sea breeze, making this warship converted from a merchant ship look particularly powerful. However, there was a little hiccup in the welcoming ceremony at the beginning, because the first people to disembark were a group of staggering and disheveled people, like a group of drunken people. The clothes of these people were quite mixed, but no one dared to underestimate them. After seeing their appearance clearly, some timid soldiers even pulled out the sabers on their waists. Nothing else, just because the Dothraki who came down first were the Dothraki who followed Daenerys. No city-state on the continent of Essos has a good impression of this group of barbarian cavalry who come and go like the wind. Savage, cruel, bloodthirsty, and stinky are probably synonymous with these people. Now that they suddenly saw such a group of guys landing, these slave traders immediately panicked, even if these Dothraki were superimposed with the negative state of severe seasickness. The surrounding crowd suddenly screamed and let out high-decibel screams. The crowd squirmed and fled towards the city gate, dragging the confused Clay with them, and entered the city in a daze. Well, the joint plan encountered variables and the comrades were forced to move. A small episode turned into a big trouble. Clay had no choice but to go back to his room first and wait until Daenerys and the others settled in the city before finding a way to find her. Now, he couldn't get out even if he wanted to. The defenders at the city gate didn't know what was happening in the direction of the dock. They just saw the citizens screaming and fleeing back to the city, shouting that the Dothraki were coming. So, the guy in charge of the gate immediately closed the heavy city gate, leaving Clay, who was staring at the gate, speechless. It's really your fault. How terrifying are the Dothraki? This stress syndrome is simply amazing. I have to say, it's really amazing. There was a commotion at the city gate, and finally Daenerys and her party were led into the city. However, because Daenerys insisted on bringing all her followers into the city, the helpless defenders had to send twice as many troops. Monitor Daenerys and her party. But Clay doesn't care. Even if you send people to surround Daenerys' place, Clay will still have a way to get in. A Witcher is a good hand when doing good things, proficient in every field. As night fell, the turmoil caused by the Mother of Dragons' entry into the city only affected a little area in the west of the city. Most of the people in Astapor still enjoyed a peaceful night. In the middle of the night, Clay came out of his apartment. He didn't cover his face because he wasn't afraid of exposing his face to the guards here. Just kidding, who in this place knows who Clay Manderly is? This handsome face is the best protection. Unless he is unlucky enough to meet a guy with a Naval orientation, he will be remembered. Clay, who transformed into Daredevil, walked through the streets and alleys of Astapor. He had a very good memory. Wandering around Astapor in the past 2 days allowed him to remember a lot of places. An unlucky soldier asked where Daenerys and her group were staying. Clay did not perform throat surgery on him this time, not because he suddenly softened, but because he was worried that the smell of blood would cause unnecessary trouble. Fortunately, after Clay escaped 3 or 4 waves of patrolling soldiers, he finally arrived at the large courtyard where Daenerys and her party were stationed without any danger. The brick wall that was 2 people high was not a problem at all for Clay. With a little help, he completed the basic operation of climbing over the wall. Well, you can't blame him. He has never experienced a celestial sphere in the world of ice and fire. Intersection, there are so many monsters. Demon hunters also want to save face, right? It's understandable that they occasionally use their advantages to do other things. That's it. The defense here is not as exaggerated as Clay imagined. Most of Daenerys' protective forces are placed on the outer layer, near the house she brought with her. That is, a few maids and a stan, that is, Boss Leston is here. The old knight did not rest and was drinking wine in the yard. This was probably a gift from the good friends to Daenerys. When Clay was on the boat, he didn't notice that Daenerys still had wine with her. Sir Barristan, it is not the behavior of a generous gentleman to enjoy fine wine alone here. Come on, pour me a glass too. I've been here for so long and I'm already craving for this sip. Clay's voice suddenly rang in Barristan's ears, frightening the old knight's heart to beat wildly. He almost died on the spot. His palm instinctively moved towards the long staff lying aside, but was struck by a young and powerful palm. Blocked. The tense muscles slowly relaxed, and Sir Barristan Selmy realized who the owner of the voice was. Clay sat in front of him without noticing anything, grabbed the wine glass on the plate, and put it on the table. In front of Liston. Looking blankly at Clay, who had a smile on his face, Barristan decided not to bother thinking about how Clay got in. There are so many magical and unreasonable things about Clay Manderly that Barristan will not be surprised by anything he does. With a wry smile, he poured a glass for Clay, who immediately grabbed it and drank it. Unfortunately, Astapor's wine glass was too small, so he didn't get excited at all, he just had a taste. Waiting very patiently for Clay to finish drinking, Barristan also kept trying to figure out Clay's intention of coming late at night. This guy who controls the dragon is too mysterious, and every move he makes deserves careful consideration. Clay Manderly, can you tell me what you were doing here? Barristan watched with interest the wine disappearing spell Clay had just performed, but the old knight, as Daenerys' bodyguard, was still performing his duties. Just call me Clay. There's no need to mention my last name every time. Clay waved his hand, then pointed to the room still lit with candlelight and whispered, I'll come find her. Now? Yeah, now. Looking at Clay's natural expression, the old man's expression was quite complicated. He spent a long time organizing his words with a distorted face, and then said rather awkwardly and hesitantly, Clay, isn't it nice of you to be so direct? Even though His Majesty has a good impression of you, he is probably too anxious. Chapter 158. A little later today, as the title says, the author has a test in the afternoon and goes back to code in the evening. Chapter 159. Daenerys. I want to, Clay. No, you don't want to. Blinking his eyes, Clay's long reflex arc finally connected. Clay chewed on what Barristan had just subconsciously said. Well, the keyword was obtained. Clay is not a vegetarian. He has maintained his own self for such a long time, mainly because he knows too well that in this world where little hats do not exist, eating meat without any scruples is not a wise choice. Although he later, became a demon hunter and ordinary viruses were in despair in front of his immune system, this habit was developed. Moreover, he is a highly skilled person and is good at walking on narrow roads. As for the broad avenues with heavy traffic, he still has to be grateful. To be fair, the little queen still looks good in terms of his aesthetics, but she is a little short. But given her age, it is understandable. Clay doesn't object to experiencing what it's like to be Drogon's father now, but he's not in a hurry. Daenerys is definitely more wary and repulsive towards him now than she is accepting of him. Sometimes, the spear can make them like it very much, but it can't make them heart. Again, the first thing Clay wants to get from Daenerys is not this, but the golden thing. Of course, if Clay gets what he wants, this kind of icing on the cake, he will only object if his brain is caught in the door. Shaking his head, Clay once again poured himself a glass of a Stapper-flavored craft beer and smiled. No, that is not the primary purpose of my coming today. Sir Barristan, I believe you also know what your queen is here for. Apart from the well-known Unsullied, a Stapper has nothing to attract an Avenger like Daenerys Targaryen who is dedicated to restoring her country, right? Barristan was speechless. In fact, in his heart, he was opposed to Daenerys doing this. Westeros had been abolishing slavery for a long time, and slavery was regarded as unforgivable by everyone from top to bottom. Sin. This is especially true for someone like him who comes from a big family and has a barely adequate sense of justice. What about you, Clay? What do you think of these Unsullied ones and the city of Astapor? With your dragon, you can easily conquer the city. Barristan stared into Clay's eyes. He wanted to know what Clay was thinking. The young man in front of him was full of mysteries. The closer he got, the more doubts he had in his heart. Regarding Barristan's question, there was no serious look on Clay's face at all. He was shaking the silver wine glass that reflected the dazzling silver in the moonlight, and a hint of playfulness crept into the corner of his mouth. Consumables at reasonable prices, with a little tidying up can be a good rear area. Clay said 2 short sentences, and Barristan understood that these were answers to the 2 questions he had just asked. His gray-white eyebrows were raised. Obviously, Clay's answer exceeded his expectations. While Barristan was still contemplating, Clay turned his gaze to one side because he heard the sound of small footsteps. Sure enough, it was Daenerys, but she obviously didn't expect Clay to be here. The moment she saw her, there was a very obvious look on her fair face. Clay, why are you here? How did you get in? The little queen was obviously very surprised. She glanced around the place and saw Stan, who had come to his senses, stood up and gave up his seat, standing respectfully aside. Then she saw the wine bottles on the table. The handsome eyebrows twitched slightly. It was obvious that these 2 guys had been here for a while and were drunk. Daenerys suddenly had a bad feeling. Why did everyone around her have such a good impression of this guy? Just now, I was staying in my room, lying on my soft big bed, talking to my maid about women's secrets. The little maid also expressed her love for this guy in her words. Daenerys knew that look, so it was even more uncomfortable when she saw the scene. How long has it been? The little queen's face was slightly ugly. Fortunately, she didn't hear what Clay called Barristan just now. Otherwise, she would have exploded now, thinking that Clay had negotiated with Barristan to lie to her. Stan, you are no longer needed here. Go find Belwas. Daenerys' tone was cold and unpleasant, and she ordered Barristan to be kicked out. Barristan shrugged his shoulders slightly, glanced at Clay and Daenerys, and moved his palms towards the wine bottles on the table without leaving any trace. The ground stretched out. Then, he was caught by the smiling Clay. Looking at Barristan leaving with a smile, Clay said to himself that he had been here for so long, and today he finally tasted something drinkable. Everything in the hotel was filled with pot water and he couldn't drink it at all. Just like this, you old boy still wants to rob me, how can this be possible? Exclamation when Barristan's footsteps faded away. Clay and Daenerys were the only 2 people left in the small courtyard, looking at the bottle of wine on the table and looking at each other wordlessly. After being stiff for a long time, Daenerys put on an awkward smile, pointed at the bottle of wine that Clay had grabbed urgently, and said softly, "Does it taste good? Why haven't I liked alcohol since I was a child? Every time my brother gets drunk, he always seems, well, a little irritable and not so friendly." Speaking later, Daenerys' voice had become much softer because she realized that she shouldn't mention this to an outsider like Clay, but just now, in order to relieve the embarrassment, she said it as soon as her mind got hot. Staring into Daenerys' somewhat evasive eyes, Clay understood what Daenerys had not finished saying. Viserys Targaryen, to a certain extent, is very worthy of sympathy. He is different from Daenerys. When he was alive, he was the unquestionable heir of the Targaryen family. He witnessed the family's tragedy when he was a child, which also foreshadowed his subsequent ending. According to Clay, Viserys never knew what he really wanted. His whole life was a life of being kidnapped by an illusory throne. Everyone around him told him how much hatred he bore against his country and his family, how noble his blood was, and how vast the land he claimed was. In short, like the fake Aegon Targaryen who was lucky enough to be alive, he lost himself in the constant indoctrination of others and could not clearly see what he wanted to do and what he could do. His death was not unjust at all, but it did not deserve to be laughed at. Your brother probably won't do anything to you when he sees you like you are now. After all, you are the mother of dragons, Daenerys. Clay smiled and motioned for Daenerys to relax and just sit down and chat. After that, he thoughtfully took out an empty glass and gave Daenerys half a glass of wine. Frowning slightly, the little queen stared at the dark red wine. She wanted to refuse, but she glanced at Clay who was staring at her from the corner of her eye. After struggling slightly, she put it to her mouth and took a sip. "It doesn't taste good," Daenerys commented. "It doesn't matter, it's just that alcohol relaxes you, Daenerys." Clay slightly bent his fingers and flicked the wine glass, making a crisp sound. There was another awkward look at each other. After all, Daenerys' patience was not as good as Clay's, so she couldn't help but say, "You came to me so late. What's the matter?" After saying this, her face suddenly became a little unnatural, obviously thinking of a possibility, and her originally even breathing gradually became a little faster. Don't blame her for thinking wildly. Any woman would involuntarily think in this direction under such conditions. I can't blame Daenerys for this. Daenerys, you want the Unsullied in the hands of these lords of Astapor, right? Clay's voice interrupted his fantasy. For some reason, a subtle disappointment filled his heart, but Daenerys quickly adjusted it because she knew this guy was going to get down to business. Yes, you are right. I need these warriors, my ancestors the conquerors, to defeat the original kings of the Seven Kingdoms. It is not just 3 giant dragons. Very good, then can you tell me how you plan to buy so many unsullied ones? Believe me, I came a day or 2 earlier than you, but I'm not idle. You don't have the money to buy the army you want. Looking at Daenerys who fell silent, Clay suddenly realized something. The idea of holding a barbecue party for the good lords of Astapor was probably a temporary act of the little queen slapping her forehead. What happened later was not the product of the plan at all, but the flow of the tide. Daenerys, who was just here for a visit, changed her mind and became the liberator of Slavers Bay. So what do you think? Clay Manderly, your queen needs your advice. Clay was amused by the little thought in Daenerys' words. Good guy, I don't call you queen, but you forced me to arrange it. Daenerys, you are not my queen, but I can give you a piece of advice. However, Daenerys had no intention of letting Clay go just like that. She puffed up her face and chased after him. I am Daenerys Targaryen, now the queen of the 7 kingdoms and the sole heir to the Iron Throne. As the Lord of White Harbor, you must bow your knee to me. Clay had no reaction to Daenerys' words. He just continued to taste the delicious food in the wine glass. After a long time, he said quietly, Perhaps your father Aerys thought so when he burned those 2 Starks to death. Clay looked at Daenerys' face, his voice suddenly seemed a little erratic, and he said, To me, the crown is, to be honest, just a larger title of duke. There is nothing sacred about it. Daenerys wanted to open her lips to refute Clay's words, but she heard Clay continue, the legitimacy of the throne, to put it bluntly, is just who has the most soldiers and the weight of gold coins in his pocket. If your brother Rhaegar had won consecutive battles on the battlefield, he would have defeated all the nobles of the 7 kingdoms. If you go to King's Landing to bake, there won't be any problems. So what if the Targaryen family has ruled the 7 kingdoms for 300 years? The several guardian dukes did not hesitate at all when they rebelled. The safety of the family is greater than the glory of the royal family. I don't need to tell you this truth, but they all swore allegiance to my father in the presence of the gods. Daenerys obviously could not easily let go of the guilt of these people's rebellion. She gritted her silver teeth and said bitterly that in her education, those who broke the oath were people who would eventually be cast aside by the gods. But her anger was rewarded with a merciless sneer from Clay. Immediately, Daenerys' anger shifted. She stared at Clay, who was sipping wine, and her tone was a little dangerous. What, am I right? Yes, you are right, Daenerys. But what I want to tell you is that the gods never need human oaths, and the oath itself also has a price. As long as you can afford the price, anyone can break the word of God for you. This is wrong. The Sword of Dawn fought till the end for my family. He could have knelt down and begged for mercy. The usurper had already won the war. Really? Maybe so, but I remember correctly, he is from the Dane family, right? The Kingsguard have no family of their own. Wake up your Princess Dream, Daenerys. I once captured the Kingslayer alive. Do you think he was a Lannister or a Kingsguard? Let me tell you, the reason White on Sword did not kneel down is because his opponent was Ed Stark, a man who disdained to use dirty tricks, so he could fight without any distractions. If it's Tywin Lannister, He just needs to bring everyone in the Dane family before the Sword of Dawn without kneeling? Yes. The bloodline of the Dane family will be cut off from now on. What do you think he will choose? Throw away your naivety. I am here today to tell you that your experience and thinking are not enough for you to make a correct judgment. None of the people under you can use their brains. Take tomorrow's issue of the Unsullied as an example. Tell me, how are you going to solve this problem so that the good lords will willingly sell you 8,000 Unsullied? The little queen, who was stunned by Clay's words, held it in for a long time. Under Clay's aggressive gaze, she finally whispered, "The true dragon will never compromise with these people. If they reject me, I will bring blood and fire to them." Clay held his forehead, and sure enough, who did he learn this impulsive temperament from? He would take action whenever he disagreed. It was his fault that he came, otherwise history would be closed again tomorrow. He looked at Daenerys and his tone was quite serious. Remember, never think like this. Why? Can you burn everyone in the world? Dragon flames are not omnipotent, and this is where the problem lies. Clay reached out and knocked on Daenerys' smooth forehead. He didn't notice the latter's unnatural expression and continued his words. Let's talk to them tomorrow and see what kind of people these guys are. People always have weaknesses. Burning them is the last option. Your enemies don't just have a few thousand enemies. They number in the tens of thousands or even more than 100,000. If you can't unite some of them, then you are standing against everyone. Then your enemies will number hundreds of thousands or more. Do you understand now? If you want to restore your throne, 8,000 people are simply not enough. Don't tell me you still have a dragon. I have one too. It's pretty big, but how did Merax's die? Don't worry, Daenerys, time is on our side. Why don't we wait until they are weak enough and we have accumulated enough power to defeat them in one fell swoop? Clay stood up and opened his arms, as if to embrace the entire Estapper. Don't you think this place is a good starting point? Oh my god, I finished writing this. Sorry, it's too late today. Chapter 160 The Hand on the Waist. Unfortunately, Clay was the Dragon Knight of Galisos during the day, and at night, he tried to ride another dragon, but failed. The little queen bit her red lips and hesitated for a long time, but finally did not let Clay enter her room. But Clay doesn't care. Sooner or later it will be his and he can't run away. The good news is that Daenerys was finally persuaded by him and gave up the idea of roasting people tomorrow if they disagreed. However, the little queen insisted not to bow to these slave traders. It doesn't matter. Clay doesn't value these superficial things. Since Daenerys insists, let her do it. Anyway, he has prepared two plans. If they can negotiate, then Clay might as well play the role of Party A's father who is always willing to spend every penny. If he can't negotiate, well, Clay has prepared a surprise for these guys. After one night, Clay changed into a toker robe popular in Estapper, which is a status symbol in this city. The news that the Mother of Dragons was interested in the Unsullied had long been sent to the good lords of Estapper. They had not welcomed Daenerys before because they felt that she was a poor person who could not afford much money. But now, they probably re-evaluated Daenerys' value, so early in the morning, Clay just finished breakfast and chatted with Daenerys about Westeros, and Sir Barristan left in a hurry. Come in. Your Majesty. Clay Barristan looked over the two of them, and after pondering for a long time, he still didn't know what to call Clay. It didn't matter in private, but this person made it clear that his identity was extraordinary. He was driven away early yesterday. He only knew that Daenerys and Clay had been alone together for a long time. As for what the two did, the old knight had no idea at all and relied on his imagination. Therefore, he was not sure what to call Clay. Seemingly understanding Barristan's predicament, Daenerys glanced at Clay, who was looking at him indifferently, and asked directly with a frown. Let's just say it, Astan, did the good masters change their minds? Yes, Your Majesty, they invited you to Pride Plaza. Someone told me that they have prepared the most valuable merchandise for you. I hope you like it. Isn't that what you said in the original words? How can these slave traders be so polite? Clay, who was playing with a small wooden sculpture of a harpy, turned his head when he heard Barristan's answer and asked a strange question. Yes, I won't say the exact words. Astan believes that these people will pay the price for their arrogance. Ah. Clay smiled, stood up from the chair and patted the non-existent dust on the robe with purple lace tattoos, which meant that it was of great value. Let's go, Daenerys. The master has invited us, so we guess must attend. Daenerys nodded. This was the purpose of her coming here. However, when she looked at Clay, she suddenly thought of something and her steps slowed down. What's wrong? You're just going to follow? If not, then you are dressed like this. You can't pretend to be my attendant. I'll find you a pair of armor. Seeing Daenerys' hesitant expression, Clay smiled directly. He stretched out a hand towards Daenerys. What are you thinking about? You are not my queen. Daenerys was a little dissatisfied and confused. She didn't know what Clay meant by reaching out to her, so she walked over slowly, and then, that annoying hand wrapped around her waist. Glancing at those lavender eyes with complex expressions, Clay lowered his head and whispered in her ear, "I think it's okay to temporarily play Her Majesty the Queen's husband and aggrieve myself." The sedan swayed and swayed, finally carrying Daenerys, who was grinding her teeth and peeking at her waist from time to time, and Clay, who felt the softness of his palms, to the end of the trip, Pride Square. The last time Clay came, he only saw the slave auction in a corner of the square. The square was very big and the center was where they wanted to go. Under a huge harpy statue was a fountain made of red bricks. Clay didn't like the smell of the water. It had a faint smell of sulfur, which was as restless as the city. The black Unsullied stood in a neat square formation. Under the scorching sun, each of them was as tall as a javelin without even a trace of shaking. Clay, who had commanded a large army, only took one look and knew that there were definitely not 8,000 people in front of him. It was not that this place could not accommodate that many people. Pride Square is very big, and it is no problem for so many people to stand there. In other words, the slave owners also have reservations about themselves. They do not think that they have the financial resources to buy these unsullied ones. Behind the unsullied military formation stood a row of well-equipped, but mentally poor free folk regiments. Their number was small compared to the unsullied. But they are not commodities, they are all locals from a stepper. Of course, there are also mercenaries from other places. Behind them, there were 5 chairs, all covered with umbrella-like shades. On the chairs, 5 people of different shapes were talking to each other, but their eyes were on Clay and the one being called. He looked at Daenerys, who was holding his arm. "Tell the woman of Westeros that she needs to explain who that man is, and that the great good one needs to know." A Valyrian language with an extremely strong accent was caught by Clay's keen hearing. He could probably understand that the trading city-states on the east coast of the strait spoke languages with local accents. In fact, they are all products of the Valyrian language brought over by the Valyrian freehold after it conquered them, and mixed with the local dialect. Clay even felt that Daenerys' Valyrian language was not necessarily pure. After 300 years of iteration in the environment of Westeros, no matter how word of mouth it was passed down, it would become distorted. Daenerys didn't hear the slave master's words. She endured the strange touch on her waist and her eyes lingered on the tall harpy statue. Clay had raised this issue with him yesterday, about the religious issues in this land. Don't underestimate these magic sticks. To a certain extent, under certain conditions, these magic sticks and their fanatics can become the plus version of the unsullied, although most of the time they are greedy for life and afraid of death. Without dealing with these religions, it would be impossible to gain a foothold in Slaver's Bay. Clay couldn't summon that mysterious power to engage in materialism and atheism here, right? When the two of them walked into the pergola prepared for them, they didn't know they were coming, so they only prepared one chair. Clay glanced at Daenerys, who was also looking at him. "Is there any need to hesitate at this time?" Clay sat down as soon as he could, and then patted his thigh. Barristan, who was following behind, looked at Daenerys' flushed face and turned wisely towards the slave owners who stretched their necks to watch the excitement. The old knight used his body to block the two of them, causing the slave owners to curse. Daenerys' purple eyes stared at Clay. She had not expected this. Now that Clay had set in, her wisdom told herself that what she needed most now was to calm down. Even though she felt extremely embarrassed, she knew that she couldn't fall out with Clay in front of these people. But asking her to stand aside would confirm that Clay's status was higher than hers, which she couldn't accept despite her arrogance. Then, Daenerys glanced at Clay's thigh without any trace, and then slapped herself hard in her heart. If she sat on it, the image of the queen would be completely ruined. "Stand up," the little queen gritted her teeth and said bitterly. "Why, isn't this chair just for people to sit on?" Clay looked at Daenerys with innocent eyes that made Daenerys want to hit him. After admiring Daenerys' bewildered expression enough, the satisfied Clay stood up, stopped teasing her, and whispered, "Okay, let's get down to business first, those stinking slave traders are here." Daenerys turned around after hearing this, and sure enough, 5 of the Stepper's largest slave traders came in strides. Obviously, they couldn't see the good show, and their instinct to make money immediately took over their reason. Clay smiled and found Daenerys' waist with his hands with great skill. Then a heartbreaking pain spread from the back of his hand into his brain. Someone was pinching him, and the murderer was looking at him with the same innocent eyes. Fine Clay's face twitched slightly and he looked straight, pretending that nothing had happened, and led Daenerys towards the slave traders. "The good lords want to know your identity." Standing aside, a girl with bronze skin, about 10 years old, looked at Clay and asked a question in standard common language. Clay glanced at the little translator. This is probably Daenerys' later maid, Missandei." He did not embarrass Missandei and answered her question directly. You can recognize me as her husband, but that's not important. What's important is that we are the ones paying. Missandei looked at Clay with some curiosity. She had never heard that the Dragon Queen had a husband, and judging from the Dragon Queen's performance, she didn't seem to deny it. Glancing at the hand resting on Deanery's waist, Missandei withdrew her gaze and honestly translated Clay's words into a stapper-flavored Valyrian. The good people who got the answer immediately glanced at Carrie. Clay knew that kind of look, tisk, male instinctive jealousy. Clay knew exactly what it meant. Tell the woman of Westeros and her barbarian husband to look no further. What I sell is meat. Apart from these goods, they will not take away a single brick. The good master who spoke was quite tall, the tallest among the 5 people, but his tone was rather annoying to Clay. Clay's eyes didn't look at these guys. He kept looking at the Unsullied. It can be said that these guys are like being poured out of molds. With the masks on, you can't tell the difference between them. Tell me how they were trained, and I want to know if they are worth a reasonable price. Clay said to Missandei that of course he understood what these slave traders were saying, but he was happy to play along with Deanery's. After the little translator completed his work, these people all showed smiles of satisfaction, as long as they could talk business. They liked this kind of thing the most. As you wish, the other guy replied, looking at Clay like a fat pig waiting to be slaughtered. Coincidentally, Clay saw him the same way.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story, so please leave a comment below. And if you want more fanfiction audio, be sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.